because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. Patrick Christys here with you all the way through until 6 p.m. And there's loads to go at today. So here's what's on the menu in the first hour. Thousands of Afghan asylum seekers have been evicted, will be evicted from a hotel, and they will be told to take whatever accommodation they are given or register homeless. It comes amid rising tensions at another migrant hotel in Newquay. We'll be going to that live. In other news as well, the Northern Ireland terror threat has been raised to severe. That comes shortly before the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement, and shortly before Joe Biden, the US president, is due to attend. We'll find out what's going on there very, very shortly. And yes, as well, are you a tenant? Do you know anyone who is renting? Because landlords are going to be given more powers to evict rogue tenants. Does that affect you or anyone you know? And yes, in other news, now this is absolutely devastating, ladies and gentlemen. In Nashville, Tennessee, 6 people, including children as young as 9 years old, have been killed in a school shooting. And there's chilling footage, which TV viewers will be able to see now, of that school shooter, who was born a woman and was transitioning into manhood, by the way, entering the school. We'll bring you the very latest from that devastating story. Patrick Christys here on GB News, and this is the only place to be for your news for at least the next hour. Yeah, get those emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Loads to go out today, as you can see there. Primarily, I think, the news that Afghan asylum seekers, thousands of them, are due to be evicted from hotels and essentially told to take what housing they can get. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's right? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Get those coming in. But right now, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. It's 2 minutes past 3. MI5 has increased its terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. In a statement, Northern Ireland Minister Chris Heaton-Harris says an increase in terrorist-related activity in recent months has targeted police officers and put lives at risk. It comes roughly a year after Britain lowered the threat level for Northern Ireland to substantial for the first time in more than a decade. Record small boat crossings, soaring grocery bills and post-Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland are some of the issues the Prime Minister will be grilled on later today. This will be the second time Rishi Sunak answers questions from the Liaison Committee on his policies and performance. He'll be asked about the recently proposed budget plans, the economy and the Windsor framework. He'll also be questioned on that small boats crisis amid a Tory rebellion over the illegal migration bill. Nicola Sturgeon has officially tendered her resignation to the King as Scotland's First Minister, and votes to secure her replacement are being counted. Humza Yousaf is set to be sworn in as the new leader of the SNP and Scotland's next leader. The 37-year-old has the backing of the Scottish Greens as well as the SNP. Party critics have said Mr Yousaf has the wrong priorities for Scotland, focusing on independence instead of issues within the NHS and the cost of living crisis. Scottish Shadow Health Secretary Dr Sandesh Gulhane doesn't think he'll deliver for the people of Scotland.
He's also somebody who claims to be the first activist, who claims to be somebody who wants independence over everything else. He's not focused on the day job. He's not focused on the things that he should be doing. And he talks up a divisive referendum when really what we need is somebody to concentrate on things like the NHS. So what we are seeing is an SNP party who are split.
Jeremy Corbyn has been banned from running as a Labour MP at the next general election. Labour's National Executive Committee has approved Sir Keir Starmer's motion to stop Mr Corbyn standing as a candidate. Mr Corbyn was suspended from the parliamentary party in 2020 over his reaction to a damning report into anti-Semitism, which found Labour had broken equalities law. He could still run as an independent. A report has found patient safety at one of the largest NHS trusts in the country could be at risk due to a corrosive staff culture. Workers at the University Hospital's Birmingham Trust told a local care board about mafia-like behaviour within senior leaders, calling them coercive and describing them as callous. The trust has denied allegations. Staff said they'd been held in a fear of retribution if concerns were raised. It follows the death of a junior doctor whose father called the trust a hypocritical environment to work in. Prince Harry is at the High Court in London for day 2 of preliminary hearings over multiple privacy claims against the publishers of the Daily Mail. The Duke of Sussex is among a high-profile group, including Sir Elton John and Sadie Frost, who are launching legal action against associated newspapers. Yesterday, the court heard how alleged unlawful actions of the newspaper group forced Prince Harry to cut off his friends. Associate Newspapers denies the allegations, which include hiring private investigators to record private phone calls. Belarus says it'll host Russian tactical nuclear weapons after years of pressure from US and NATO allies to change its political direction. Ukraine's neighbour defended its decision to cooperate with Russia, saying its capital has been forced to strengthen its security in the face of rising risk from the West. Belarus says the Russian nuclear plans announced by President Putin over the weekend would not break international nuclear agreements, as Belarus itself would not have control over the weapons. Schools in England could face further strike action if a pay agreement can't be met, disrupting students' exams. The National Education Union has recommended its members vote to reject a new pay offer from the government and refuse to rule out strike action during the exam period. Pay disputes are ongoing, with teachers striking in February and earlier this month. Downing Street said it would be hugely disappointing if strike action disrupted exams for England's school children. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, back to Patrick.
OK, good afternoon, everybody. It's a fast-moving picture today. We're going to go live to Edinburgh now, where the Scottish National Party is selecting the new First Minister. We can hear Anna Sarwar there. That's the leader of Scottish Labour talking. It comes as Humza Yousaf has just been announced, officially anyway, as the First Minister of Scotland in Holyrood. So there was a little kind of performative vote that took place there. And he was announced, yes, as the new First Minister. Scotland officially has a new First Minister, and that First Minister officially is Humza Yousaf. So we'll be dipping in and out of that over the course of the day. But closer to where I am anyway right now in London, Rishi Sunak is currently being questioned by a committee of MPs in Westminster. Few things.
On the question of whether this bill, if enacted,
we've got record channel boat crossings and some things expected to be spoken about. It'll also going to face questions on soaring grocery prices, so the pound in your pocket, and post-Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland.
Nothing to fear from this amendment, unless, of course, they doubt their own statements to the effect that they are confident in the bill's compliance with human rights law. Mr. Evans, as it stands, this bill...
OK, well, we'll go back to it when Rishi Sunak actually does indeed start talking there. But we do kick off today with two big stories around the housing of asylum seekers and refugees in the UK. So the government has announced that thousands of Afghan refugees have to leave hotels and accept accommodation that they are offered. So essentially, they're going to be evicted from the hotels. They've been living in the hotels since fleeing the Taliban in August 2021, so it's worth noting that these are just Afghan refugees here, Afghan asylum seekers. They're not people from any other countries, as far as we know. But there are fears that this could force many into homelessness. And do you think that's really fair? Meanwhile, there's growing discontent, though, in Newquay, where a number of asylum seekers have been housed in a hotel there. So there's a few different asylum seeker and hotel-related stories doing the rounds today. I'm going to go to Newquay now with our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody. Jeff, thank you very much. So, look, what's the latest there? I understand there's been quite a lot of discontent among the local population.
There really has been a lot of discontent. I mean, here we are in Newquay, one of the most beautiful towns on the Cornish coast, on the North Cornish coast. It's surfers' paradise, surfers' heaven. At the moment, we've got a lifeguard training session going on down on the beach. They're getting match fit for the summer. But the town itself certainly isn't match fit for the summer. They say they welcome tourists all year round. But it's the 200 people that have arrived and that are staying at the Beresford Hotel up on the cliff top that's really causing the problems here. People are very divided in how they feel about that. There are those people that you talk to that say, look, Cornwall's motto is one for all. We're perfectly happy welcoming people in. You know, some people said to me, well, look, we welcome the English in every summer, so we might as well welcome everybody. Because, of course, they don't think they're English down here in Cornwall. But on a serious matter, there are those others that say, well, look, we don't feel safe. We don't know who these people are. We don't know where they come from. We don't know their background. And we feel vulnerable. There's talk of girls going to local self-defence classes because they're worried about walking home late at night on their own. And then we've had two demonstrations. One on a couple of weeks ago and one on Sunday. The one on Sunday turned particularly nasty and particularly violent, mainly due to a lot of people that appeared to be bussed in. Suddenly there were people there in masks, shouting abuse on the streets and calling everybody, including me, a fascist.
How do you live with yourself? Let the fascists go and you nick someone.
Newquay 2023. The surfers' paradise lost for the time being. Since some 200 migrants moved into the Beresford Hotel on the seafront, it's been a town on guard and divided. Those divisions now getting personal, getting angry, getting violent.
People here, I don't even know who they are, hurling abuse at locals, calling them fascists. Basically, it's caused a lot of unrest in the town, a lot of conflict. It's not done very well for Newquay. You know, we've got a huge homeless problem in Newquay. We've got a huge homeless problem, and we've got people locals that are, you know, having a hard enough time as it is with the present living day crisis that's going on.
Homeless like this man.
I've been on the streets 20 years, and at the end of the day, like, they've been here 10 minutes or however long it took for them to get over here and then get on the register to be put into accommodation straight away with benefits and a phone and 3 meals a day and fed. And I think, what about the people? What about the servicemen that are out there that, like, fought for our country? What about people that haven't got enough money to survive anymore?
The whole debate about where to house refugees, or in fact whether they are refugees at all or whether they're economic migrants, is one that now, for the people of Newquay, is beginning to sound personal. And it ties in with the whole issue of the cost of living. People here are finding life very tough at the moment, and it's getting emotional.
So we all should stick together as part of a team. It's not fair. It causes depression. But the thing is, the police are not helping at the minute with people that are depressed. And I'm suffering with depression myself. Sorry, I might get upset.
It feels too much for some. It feels they're losing their town. Some tell me they're afraid to speak up for fear of being called a fascist. Others tell me Cornwall's a welcoming county. Refugees welcome here, one and all.
My family had to live like they have to live. I'd get in a boat and risk it. I really would.
In a statement, Newquay's MP Steve Double said what is deeply regrettable is that many of the people from both sides are not Newquay residents and travelled into the area in order to protest. I don't believe these people are reflective of the vast majority of people who live and work in Newquay, who in my experience have been incredibly tolerant of the whole situation. The divisions are certainly deep, the wounds raw. The hope is they can heal before the tourist season begins and Newquay can start surfing once more. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Yeah, well, that was Jeff Moody there. Now, that is about the local unrest, as it were, about a hotel in Newquay. A little bit later on, we're going to be talking about the fact that the government is essentially evicting thousands of Afghan asylum seekers, refugees from hotels and telling them, basically, look, you've got to take whatever accommodation you can get, or you might end up being homeless. But right now, though, we're going to go to Rishi Sunak, who's facing questions from MPs, senior MPs in Westminster at the Liaison Committee about a variety of different things, including the illegal immigration stuff. Let's have it.
According to the OBR, what are your thoughts on that?
No, to the point on the fiscal rules, it's important to remember that actually what they were talking about in terms of headroom was the degree to which the delta, the change from the fourth to the fifth year. The actual overall level of debt was lower across the forecast period, lower debt interest payments, lower overall amounts of debt. So in that sense, the public finances undoubtedly strengthened since the autumn, and I think that's something we should all be thankful for. Look, going forward, you're right, you identify lots of areas of pressure, which is why, you know, when I made the commitment on aid as Chancellor and more generally when we make commitments, you know, they are subject to the fiscal and economic circumstances. And ultimately the best way to pay for the things that we'd like to spend money on is to have a growing economy. And that's why, you know, your earlier question about the investment incentives is so important. And it's why the Chancellor's measures in the budget to increase labour supply are important. If we can, and his measures indeed to improve regulation in our growth industries, particularly life sciences. And if we can get those things right, then actually we will have higher growth, and that's ultimately the best way to afford to invest in all the things, whether it's our security or anything else that we collectively think is important.
Thank you, Prime Minister.
Steve Bryan.
Thank you very much, Chair. One could say that you're gaining a reputation as a problem solver, and there's one area where that looks to be true also is the winter NHS pay dispute, in particular with the nurses and the provisional agreement with the Agenda for Change unions, which obviously is just wider than the nurses. But you'll know that there's some anxiety out there that if these agreements reached are confirmed through the unions, where the money's going to come from to pay for those increases. So will it come from existing budgets, or is there going to be extra funding to the trusts that have to pay those settlements?
I think taking a step back, I was very pleased that we were able to reach agreement with several health unions on a fair and reasonable pay settlement for about 1.4 million NHS workers. It's right that they're paid fairly and rewarded for the fantastic work they do, whether it's nurses, midwives, paramedics, or others. But also important, you know, just referring back to Harriet's questions, that was affordable for the taxpayer and consistent with our promises to halve inflation and cut the waiting list. And I think we've struck the right balance. And I think you would have seen, I hope, the comments from the Health Secretary today that did provide the reassurance that people were looking for. And now, of course, there are always conversations between departments and the Treasury that I wouldn't want to get in the middle of precisely, but I think the Health Secretary provided strong reassurance about additional funding as well as reprioritisation from elsewhere, but making sure that the commitment to continue delivering care and all our commitments to cut waiting lists is absolutely paramount and protected. And I think that's been warmly welcomed by the sector.
Yes, thank you for that. So turning to a very much linked subject, which is NHS recovery, which I know is something that you care deeply about. So last February, the elective recovery plan for tackling the COVID back.
OK, so what you were watching and listening to there is our Prime Minister Rishi Sunak just having a chat, basically, with the Liaison Committee, and he's going to be covering a wide range of issues. So what you just heard was him being grilled about the economy, also about NHS pay rises, etc. He's also going to be talking about the migrant crisis, the small boats crisis, and I believe that we can go live now to GBNews' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, and Darren's going to talk to us a bit about the Afghan evictions from hotels. So around 9,000 Afghans, as we understand it, Darren, are set to be essentially evicted from what many people would call migrant hotels. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, indeed. We've heard from Johnny Mercer in the last hour or so, essentially defending this policy in Parliament. We're expecting a formal announcement either later on today or indeed tomorrow, as you say, the moving on, if you like, of these Afghan refugees, many who, of course, took refuge in this country following the takeover by the Taliban in Afghanistan, around 18 months ago. Now, the government's argument in all of this is that they need to free up accommodation, that clearly hotels are not the best place for refugees for such a long period of time, not least of all when they've got children, though there are concerns about where many of these refugees could ultimately end up. And I think that's going to spark somewhat of a political debate about the responsibility the government has to these refugees. Many of them will have potentially had connections with Britain in the past. They will have served the UK while its forces were present in Afghanistan. And of course, they were welcomed to this country, given safe passage, as I say, following the collapse of the Afghan government in August of 2021.
Okay. All right, Darren, I'm very sorry about this, Darren, very sorry. I'm going to have to cut across you just quickly. I'm sorry about this, but we're going to have to go live now to Edinburgh, where the new First Minister of Scotland is talking. Humza Yousaf, let's take it.
Day for Scotland, as it speaks to our values as a country, as I stand here as the first ever Muslim to lead a Western democratic nation. You try telling that to 16-year-old Humza Yousaf, who post 9/11 was questioned constantly about his loyalty to this country. We have, Presiding Officer, collectively come a long way. I am joined by too many family members and friends to mention, but I hope the Chamber will indulge me, Presiding Officer, as there's a few that I would like to mention. My mum and dad have always been unwavering in their support of me. As a young Scots Asian, it was often the norm of expectation that we would end up as either doctors, dentists, pharmacists, accountants or lawyers. But I remember vividly the nerves I felt in the very pit of my stomach the day I decided to tell my parents that I wanted to study politics instead of law. Far from giving me, as my mum put it in news reports yesterday, a clip round the ear, they could not have been more supportive, saying it was vital, it was important that people like us were also represented in politics. From that day to this very moment, they have encouraged me every single step of the way. I could not be making history without them. To my wife and my girls, you are my everything, and being First Minister will not change that. It may mean that you see me slightly less often, but to my 3-year-old Amal in particular, be aware there are plenty of stairs in Butte House, so if you misbehave, there will still be a naughty step to put you on. Though, so far, I am pleased that everyone seems to be on their best behaviour. Presiding Officer, the years after 9/11 were not easy for Muslims growing up in Scotland or indeed across the UK. I've lost count of how many times my identity, my loyalty to Scotland, the only country I have ever and will ever call home, has been questioned over the years. There was a time not all that long ago when I felt I simply did not belong here in Scotland. To go from there to now leading the government as Scotland's 6th First Minister, I hope sends a strong message to every single person out there who feels that they don't belong. No matter what anyone says, no matter who you are, whether Scotland has been your home for a day or for 10 generations, no matter your ethnicity, no matter your gender, no matter your religion, no matter your sexual orientation, your transgender identity or disability, this is your home. And do not let anyone ever tell you that you are not good enough. Do not let anyone ever tell you that you do not belong. And as First Minister, I will always fight for your rights, and where possible, I will do everything I can to advance them. I will always stand up for social justice more widely and for making Scotland a fairer as well as a wealthier nation. A key priority of my government will be to protect every Scot as far as we can from the harm that has been inflicted by the cost of living crisis. One of my first conversations as First Minister will be with anti-poverty groups to explore what more we can do within our devolved powers to tackle child poverty. We will protect and we will reform our NHS and social care and other vital public services to support a wellbeing economy, to improve the life chances of people right across our country. We will rapidly develop plans to extend childcare, improve rural housing, support small businesses and boost innovation. We will keep the promise that we have made to people with experience of the care system. Not just young people, as important of course as that is, but we recognise that care experience is lifelong. We will bring forward reforms of the criminal justice system, continue our work to reduce drugs death, and create a new deal with local government to empower our local authorities to meet the challenges of the day. We will support businesses. We will seize the economic and social opportunities of a just transition to net zero. And we will continue to ensure that Scotland uses its voice on the international stage. On Thursday, I will nominate the team of ministers who will deliver on those priorities. I will then set out more detailed policies to this chamber in the first week after the Easter recess. I will be very proud to build on the record of the government that has been led by Nicola Sturgeon and John Swinney. The Scottish Child Payment, the expansion of childcare, Scotland's international leadership and the transition to net zero, their championing of equality. Through all of those achievements and many more besides, Nicola Sturgeon and John Swinney have both left a significant legacy, of which I am very, very grateful to them for. But I know there's also so much more to come from both of them.
OK, so again, what you were watching and listening to there is Humza Yousaf talking in Holyrood. He is now the First Minister of Scotland, taking over from Nicola Sturgeon. What you heard first and foremost was him talking about his heritage and his racial background, etc., and how significant it is now that he is the first Muslim leader of actually any real Western country, I believe. And then he went on to outline some of the social problems that he's going to try to sort during his tenure. But we're going to come off that now and we'll bring you a highlight, or depending on which way you look at it, low light reel, a little bit later on. We're going to go to Northern Ireland, though, because Northern Ireland Secretary Chris Heaton-Harris has told the House of Commons that the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland has been raised from substantial to severe. And the Cabinet Minister said while Northern Ireland has transformed into a peaceful society since the Troubles, a small number of people remain determined to cause harm to our communities through acts of politically motivated violence. Of course, it comes not too long before US President Joe Biden is due to visit, and as well the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. Let's cross live now to Belfast, where our GB News Northern Ireland reporter has the latest. Doogie, thank you very much. Yeah, what is the latest sense? That terror threat is now severe.
Yeah, well, it is, and it means that it's very likely to happen. But I mean, this assessment happens about every 6 months, and of course, this one comes on the back of the attempted murder of 2 officers when a homemade device was thrown at their car in Strabane a few months ago, and of course, the awful attack on DCI John Caldwell in Omagh, who is still in a critical condition in hospital after that attack, and of course. That attack then opened all sorts of doors, a stream of tree-shaking arrests, because the PSNI used the Anti-Terrorism Act, which allows them to hold people for much longer, a much wider use of warrants. So in other words, you don't have to go and get one for every premises. And of course, in that, they raided over 100 officers on that case. They raided many, many homes across Northern Ireland. Both Unionist Loyalist and Nationalist Republicans were raided. In fact, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, dissident terrorists in Derry, the raids have been going on there. And in County Down over the last week, many, many raids going on in amongst loyalism. Now, of course, the first 4 arrests that actually appeared during that initial investigation were from those closest to the loyalist communities, which would very much point to organised crime rather than paramilitarism. But that sort of puts that case in a different direction. But what we do know is that the information that was probably gleaned from those raids quite scared the security forces here, how much targeting had been going on, maybe weaponry that was found, and they have then decided that this is going to severe because something they have found is sitting there ready for the 25th year anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement.
Indeed. Look, Doogie, thank you very, very much. Doogie Beattie there from Belfast, bringing you the latest about that terror threat in Northern Ireland being raised now to severe. Prince Harry is back at the High Court in his privacy battle with the owners of the Daily Mail. We'll have an update on that. And I've got another court case as well. This one in America, though, with Gwyneth Paltrow. By the way, that is just your typical Hollywood court case. We have got some fantastic footage of that. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back and good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. I'm Tamsin Roberts. It's 3:31. Here are the headlines. SNP leader Humza Yousaf has been selected as Scotland's youngest First Minister and the first from a minority ethnic background. MSPs voted to secure his position at the Scottish Parliament in the last half an hour. He's replacing Nicola Sturgeon, who officially tendered her resignation as First Minister to the King earlier. MI5 has increased its terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. In a statement, Northern Ireland Minister Christys Harris says an increase in terrorist-related activity in recent months has targeted police officers and put lives at risk. It comes roughly a year after Britain lowered the threat level for Northern Ireland to substantial for the first time in more than a decade. Rishi Sunak has defended the level of funding allocated to the Ministry of Defence to rebuild ammunition stockpiles, which have been run down by the war in Ukraine. The Prime Minister is currently facing questions from the Liaison Committee on his policies and performance. Senior MPs will also ask him about record small boat crossings, soaring grocery bills and post-Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland. Jeremy Corbyn has been banned from running as a Labour MP at the next general election. Labour's National Executive Committee has approved Sir Keir Starmer's motion to stop Mr Corbyn standing as a candidate. He was suspended from the parliamentary party in 2020 over his reaction to a damning report into anti-Semitism, which found Labour had broken equalities law. he could still run as an independent. TV, online, radio and on TuneIn, this is GB News. Now it's over to Patrick.
Yes, well, the first of two quite celebrity-based court cases that we'll be bringing you today. This one involves Prince Harry, and he's at the Royal High Court for day 2 of the court case into alleged phone tapping by the publisher of the Daily Mail. Yesterday, the Duke of Sussex made a surprise appearance at the court alongside Sir Elton John, who's also bringing legal action against associated newspapers. It's believed to be the first time the Duke has been in the UK since the funeral of the late Queen last September. With me now is Cameron Walker, our royal reporter. Cameron, yes, so what's the latest goings-on from inside there today, then?
Well, Prince Harry has obviously turned up for day 2, and the fact that Prince Harry has turned up to any of it is actually quite surprising, because it's only a 4-day preliminary hearing for the judge to decide whether or not there is essentially a case which has to go to a full-blown trial. So Prince Harry, along with Elton John, Sadie Frost, actress Elizabeth Hurley, Baroness Lawrence and a few others, high-profile figures, are collectively suing associated newspapers who are the publishers of the Daily Mail, Mail on Sunday, over alleged unlawful information gathering at the publications. And basically, it's basically seeing whether or not it can go to a full trial or not.
Yeah, indeed. He's obviously very keen for it to be there. He's, I think, trying to put on a little bit of pressure, isn't he, really, and make his presence known.
Yeah, exactly. I think the fact that it was such a public entrance yesterday, and indeed today, he was saying good morning to photographers and the journalists, shows just how important, perhaps, this is to him. Prince Harry has said in a previous interview that he sees it, and I quote, his life's work, to hold those that he sees in power to account, who are allegedly behind this unlawful information gathering at publications. That is the allegation. Associated newspapers have denied all the claims. But also, he wants to essentially change the way tabloid journalism in the United Kingdom works. He isn't looking for financial assessments here. In fact, I think it's very unlikely we'll see the case settle outside.
Well, it's more of an emotional thing, isn't it? And what he's trying to say as well is that he suffered from suspicion and paranoia and lost friends because of newspaper articles. So, in relation to things like alleged phone tapping and just general nefarious activities by the British media, he is saying that that cost him peace of mind, mental health and friendships.
Yeah, exactly. His lawyers argued yesterday that he basically couldn't trust his inner circle because he assumes that they were leaking stuff to the press. But Prince Harry now believes that the press got the information and therefore wrote up, let's say, undesirable stories about him because they allegedly either tapped his phone or planted listening devices in his cards, etc., etc. They are the allegations. Again, associated newspapers deny it all. But even Elton John's lawyers, who's also part of this case, is alleging that him and his husband, David Furnish, were so paranoid that they got people employed to watch their security cameras inside their homes 24/7, that they were worried that people were listening to their very personal phone calls. So there's a lot of evidence we've heard already, but of course, again, it's just a preliminary trial, isn't it? It's not
it is, and it
trial,
dates, in some cases, it dates so far back that they may decide that it's actually not really relevant now. It is the issue. Cameron, thank you very, very much. Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter. And, so what do you make of all of that, ladies and gentlemen? Prince Harry, of course, in court for the second time today. We're going to take you a little bit later on, by the way, to Gwyneth Paltrow. Now, she's essentially on trial for a ski crash, and that's taking place in America. We're going to play you some clips in a little bit about this. It is just your classic Hollywood-style laugh-a-minute trial, that. You will not be able to get your heads around it, but there we go. Moving on, a bit closer to home, Jeremy Corbyn has been blocked from standing as a Labour candidate at the next election, with Sir Keir Starmer confirming the move at a meeting of the party's ruling body, the NEC. So Corbyn will not be endorsed as a formal Labour candidate. He's currently representing Islington North, obviously, as an independent after losing the party whip over his stance on anti-Semitism. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has said that Sir Keir had denigrated the democratic foundations of Labour by trying to block him from standing. We can go now to our deputy political editor, Tom Harwood, who's outside Labour HQ for us. Tom, thank you very much. So, look, pretty bad day for Jeremy Corbyn. Is it a bad look for the Labour Party, though?
Well, I think it's exactly what Keir Starmer wants everyone to be talking about. The idea of this Labour Party leadership is trying to give a sense that the Labour Party has changed. The phrase that Sir Keir Starmer often uses now is that the party is under new management. So I think the vote today by the NEC of the Labour Party is as much about optics as it is about the reality of whether or not Jeremy Corbyn will be a Labour Member of Parliament. This is about what the Labour Party is projecting to the country. And Sir Keir Starmer is very, very keen to differentiate himself from his direct predecessor, the man who he campaigned for, the man he wanted to become Prime Minister, the man who he said was his friend and who he would defend the legacy of as Labour leader. Well, Sir Keir Starmer has about turned on all of those points, has ditched the policies he campaigned on, has ditched his friend Jeremy Corbyn, and is now trying to convince the country that he, and indeed the Labour Party, have changed their minds. It remains, however, an open question as to whether or not the country will buy into that story.
Yeah, I mean, I think it raises serious concerns about whether or not people can really trust Keir Starmer on this. He backed Jeremy Corbyn, tried to get him elected twice, was full square behind him at one point, and then now, of course, he doesn't appear to like him very much and wants him out of the party. Tom, I'm keen to know what happens in Islington North, though, at the next general election. Does Corbyn win it?
Well, this is a really interesting question because, of course, we're looking at the constituency Labour Party and what they've been saying today. And the constituency Labour Party seem to be very supportive of Jeremy Corbyn. They have released a statement pointing to the words that Keir Starmer used back in 2020 when he was standing to be leader of the Labour Party, saying that local constituencies should choose their candidates rather than the national party, rather than centrally imposed candidates. Well, that's exactly what has happened now. Yet another U-turn from Sir Keir Starmer. The national NEC choosing that, saying that someone must be banned from standing when clearly the local party wanted that man to stand. So it's a very interesting proposition here. What will the local party do? Might they get behind an independent Jeremy Corbyn campaign, or might they simply row in behind whoever the eventual Labour Party candidate is? It doesn't seem like it's a settled issue at all in Islington North.
Tom, thank you very much. Our Deputy Political Editor, Tom Harwood there. Emails have been coming in thick and fast. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Just going to go to one of them quickly. It's in relation to the story that is going to be leading on next hour, actually, which is that thousands of Afghan asylum seekers, people who fled the Taliban a year or so ago, a couple of years ago, are going to be booted out of the hotels that they've been living in and told to accept whatever accommodation that they are given or possibly render themselves homeless. Jenny has been on. She says these families will be offered a new home in our country after being in hotels for around 20 months. Many of our own children would welcome an offer of a new home, as many of them still live with their parents. Of course, the other side to this is very much that what happens if they decide that they don't want this accommodation? Do they then end up on the streets? How does that really work? Your views, of course, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But, well, quite topical in a way. Landlords will have new powers to evict rowdy tenants. Why some say that this will make the UK's housing crisis even worse. Nightmare tenants, people. Hopefully we'll get stuck right into that very shortly. I'm Patrick Christys and this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Yes, welcome back. Now, US President Joe Biden has called on Congress to pass an assault weapons ban after 6 people, including 3 children, were killed in a school shooting in Nashville on Monday. The shooter, identified as 28-year-old former student Audrey Elizabeth Hale, here shown entering the building in chilling footage, was killed by responding police officers. Now, Nashville Police Chief John Drake has confirmed in a search of Hale's home that police had found 2 more maps pertaining to maybe some thinking about some other incidents, and a manifesto indicating the shooting was highly planned. We're going to stick with some of these shocking images now for you, really. Yes, some of those children that were involved were just as young as 9 years old as well, which is pretty devastating. The Covenant School, which is a private Christian school for students aged 3 to 11. The footage you'll be seeing on your screens now if you're watching us on TV is that individual walking into the school in the first place. It's also worth noting as well that the individual there was born as a female and was had transitioned into being a male. A spokesperson for the Washington Post, told the Washington Post that Hale is a biological woman who, on a social media profile, used male pronouns. They'd left a manifesto, drawn detailed maps of the school, and officers said they believe that resentment may have been a motive. It was the school that the gunman did attend several years ago. So they drove to the school, got in by firing through one of the school's doors, which were all locked, as of course is often the case in America, because unfortunately they have so many of these incidents, don't they? And yeah, video did later emerge showing that they'd used that gun to gain entry by shattering glass panes on the front doors and just, as we can all gather, then just wandering around the school willy-nilly before eventually being shot dead by police. So that's the latest there from Nashville in Tennessee. We'll bring you more as and when we get it, but Joe Biden, of course, urging now the American Congress to actually act and do more to ban the sale of guns and to have tighter gun controls to stop incidents like this taking place. Just one last one, really. The Nashville Police Chief, John Drake, said that investigators found this manifesto and a map of how all of this was going to play out, including entry and exit points at the school buildings. Apparently, the shooter had conducted surveillance while planning the attack, and it just is absolutely, utterly devastating. As I've said, at least 4 of the victims there were 9 years old. So there we go. That's the latest from Nashville, Tennessee. Right, OK, we're going to move away from that story for now and talk about shop inflation, because shop inflation has hit record highs again this morning, with sugar and cocoa-based products leading the rise. And yes, that means more expensive Easter eggs. I don't know about you, but I was in Tesco's the other day. I was looking around, it's like 14 quid for an Easter egg, which is mad, isn't it? Maybe it's just me. And pressure is mounting for the Bank of England governor, who is blaming early retirement and labour gaps for rising inflation, higher interest rates. It's all going off in the economy. Here to pick through it all is our economics and business editor. It's Liam Halligan with On the Money. Are you telling me I'm going to have to pay 15 quid for an Easter egg?
You may have to, Patrick.
Absolutely shocking. Shocking. No, look, what's going on there? Come on.
So inflation in general is going down, right? We had a blip in February where inflation went up from 10.1 to 10.4%. But in general, the long-term trend is down. But food price inflation is proving to be really sticky. It's really hanging around because the food prices that are in the shops now reflect the farmers' costs 6 months ago, obviously, because food takes time to grow when energy costs were higher, fertiliser costs were higher, and so on. Now, have a look at some of these numbers, and we can talk them through for radio listeners as well. These are from Cantor, which is a consultancy, a private sector consultancy that monitors food prices. March, we're not even at the end of March, but Cantor say that so far in March, food prices were 17.5% up year on year. That means on March 2022. That's much, much higher than the basic rate of inflation, which in February was 10.4%, Patrick. That's for all goods. So you can see there, food prices going up by much more than prices in general. And Cantor say that that means that the price of an average shopping bill for households throughout a single year is now 837 quid higher. That's a huge amount of money in a year for, any family, frankly. £837 more on the same amount of food bought in a single year. And they're also saying, Cantor, that the most eye-watering price rises are for eggs, milk, cheese, dairy products, where there's feedstock. That's very, very expensive for farmers. And we know, Patrick, that food price inflation hits the poor hardest. Why? Because they spend a bigger amount of their income on food. So even though inflation is probably going to fall by the end of the year from about 10 to about 5%, I think that's pretty much nailed on. Food price inflation is going to remain stubbornly high, and that's politically really, really toxic.
Yeah, what's going to happen with interest rates then, do we think?
Well, interesting you should say that on interest rates. See what I did there? So Andrew Bailey, who's the governor of the Bank of England, I'm starting to calling him the not-me governor of the Bank of England, because he keeps coming up with reasons why inflation isn't his fault, or it's not just him, it's the Monetary Policy Committee, the 9 economists at the Bank of England, of whom he is the most senior. He chairs that committee. In my view, they should have started raising interest rates a lot earlier than they did. They kept saying inflation was transitory for too long. But in recent days and weeks, Andrew Bailey has been saying why it is that inflation is high, apart from the fact that interest rates didn't go up fast enough. He said last week that inflation was too high because firms were too willing to eagerly passing on price rises in the supply chain. Some people call that profiteering. I do think there's a bit of that going on. I absolutely think that's a bit of that going on. So he's got a point. And I also think he's got a bit of a point when he said yesterday in a speech at the London School of Economics that inflation is high because a lot of people haven't come back to the workforce after COVID. He focused on retirees, not 50 to 60-year-olds not coming back into the workforce after COVID. But there's a lot more people up and down the age range who just haven't come back because they've got long COVID or they're signed off long-term sick. And you ask about what's going to happen about interest rates. Well, we got a bit of a clue on that today because Andrew Bailey was talking to the cross-party committee of MPs at the House of Commons, the Treasury Select Committee, and he was reassuring us, he was trying to reassure us that despite the banking squalls that we've seen, the collapses of banks in the States and in Switzerland, he was saying to MPs today, Patrick, and here's the clip, that as far as he's concerned, the British banking sector is safe.
I don't think that any of them, and we've said this, that any of these features cause stress in the UK banking system. I don't think we are at all in the place we were in 2007-8. We're in a very different place to then. But we have to be very vigilant. So if I give you the answer, I don't think there's a problem going forwards. I do not want to give you for a moment the idea that we are not very vigilant, because we are. We are in a period of very heightened, frankly, tension and alertness, and we will go on being vigilant.
Yeah, he said the word vigilant several times there. What does he mean?
See, the thing about central banking, right? Alan Greenspan was the head of the Federal Reserve for many years. He had this great phrase. They speak in elliptical language, right? Because if you can't be properly understood, you can never be wrong, right? And Alan Greenspan once said, if you're not confused, you've probably misunderstood me.
This is fantastic. Yeah, great.
But look, we can pick out these words and we can pore over them and try and work out what they mean, OK? Vigilant, in this case, means two things. It means they're going to keep their beady eyes on the banking sector. And if there's any sign that a bank may be looking a bit rocky and going bust, that they'll be in there and trying to do deals between other banks and keep the banks together. Banking, in many ways, is a confidence trick in the Western world. But vigilant also means I'm afraid that if inflation persists, we will see another interest rate rise. Now, a lot of us thought that the last interest rate rise we had from 4 to 4.25% could have been the last. But we know now that inflation did blip upwards in February. Look, if this next inflation number in March that will come out in a couple of weeks' time, as we go into early and mid-April, if that inflation number is single digits, I reckon then we've had the last interest rate rise.
OK.
But what Andrew Bailey is saying is he's not promising that.
No.
We may see another interest rate rise, not least because food price inflation stays so high.
Look, Liam, thank you very, very much. As ever, Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. Right, you may have heard me mention a little bit earlier on there about me being deeply concerned about the price of chocolate going up. And as I announced that on television, I did have a message from my missus to say, stop looking at chocolate in the shops, you've put weight on. And she's not wrong. But we do have more on the staggering increase in the price of chocolate now from our own reporter Ray Addison, who has been sent out, I think, to the kind of story that every journalist loves to cover. He's at Charlie's Sweet Shop. Good grief, I'm so jealous of you. What's going on there in Belmont?
Yes, well, what a task, what a job to have today, Patrick. What a nightmare. But no, I've been enjoying it. I've been all over the sweet shops, all over Sussex and Surrey. I'm here in Surrey at the moment at Charlie's Sweet Stop in the village of Belmont in Surrey. I've been talking to residents and people. They've been telling me that they're actually thinking that they're not going to buy any Easter eggs this year because of the rise in cost, and maybe they'll just go and get big chocolate bars as well. Also, older people telling me that they've noticed their grandchildren are just not eating as much sugar. They buy them sweets and then it just lasts forever. So there seems to have been a few changes, of course, driven by this rise in the cost of sugar as well. Now, Phil Venard is the owner of the store here. He joins me now. Phil, thanks very much for joining me. And now, tell me about the difference that you've seen in your costs as sugar prices have risen.
Yes, just over the last few months, we're having to check costs every single day because we're reordering the same things and they're just going up and up and up. So yeah, whether it's chocolate bars or sweets, it's just getting more expensive every day. So yeah, just keeping on top of it really.
Have you seen a difference, a change in your customers' buying behaviour? How many times they come into the store, how much money they spend when they come here? Because sweets are a luxury, or they should be, Patrick.
Yeah, I think people are on tighter budgets. Before, if something was £1, 100 grams, you've got some free will with the kids. Now they're sort of weighing as they go and checking sort of how much they're spending. So yeah, it's definitely important to people now. They're watching what they're spending.
Now, I noticed here in Charlie's Sweet Stop, you don't have any Easter eggs. Why is that? Is that because it's hard to compete with the supermarkets?
I cannot buy Easter eggs cheaper than the supermarkets, and it's embarrassing to sell them at £1, £2 more than what they see when they're doing their weekly shop. They're buying power, they buy lorry loads. We buy a box load, and it's just not worth the risk of being, things are so tight. We don't want the risk of being stuck with them, really.
Phil, thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate it. Thanks for closing the door to your store as well. Now, we are hearing, Patrick, that the harvests are improving in the last couple of months, and that means that the price of sugar should be going down soon. However, it won't be soon enough to have an impact for Easter.
Look, Ray, thank you very, very much. I thoroughly hope that we continue to send Ray to an assortment of different sweet shops around that area, and we keep coming back to him as he gets gradually higher and higher off a sugar rush like a child. Ray, good stuff. Thank you very much. Ray Addison there, who has got the luckiest gig out of today's reporters' pool. He was at Charlie's Sweet Stop in Belmont. Look, stay with us because we're expecting Gwyneth Paltrow. That's right. People, you are not going to want to miss this. I've got some clips to play for you of Gwyneth Paltrow's trial, and it's the total Hollywood guff, OK? You will love it. It's hilarious. You're going to appear in court, though, in Utah in the next hour. We will cross to that live, as well as, of course, the very latest, as thousands of Afghan asylum seekers are set to be evicted from a hotel and potentially made homeless. I'm Patrick Christys. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, everybody. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. It's about to go 4 o'clock, and here's what I've got for you this hour. So, yes, of course, we do start with the news that thousands of Afghan asylum seekers are set to be turfed out of whatever hotels they're in, told to take whatever accommodation they're offered, or essentially find themselves homeless. It does come as well amid growing tensions in Newquay in Cornwall, as residents there get very angry about their local migrant hotel. We'll bring you all of the detail on that. In other news, in Northern Ireland, it's big news for Northern Ireland because the terror threat there has been raised to severe. It's just before President Joe Biden's due to come on a visit and shortly before the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. We'll let you know exactly why that terror threat has now been hiked very, very shortly. And rogue tenants, they're the bane of any landlord's existence. I dare say plenty of you live next door to some people who you think are pretty rogue. Well, good news for you, because the landlords now might be able to turf them out on their backside with just a couple of weeks' notice. I'll tell you more on that, again, very, very shortly. And yes, now, look, we had Prince Harry in court, didn't we? Now it's Gwyneth Paltrow. This is a trial based around a ski crash in Utah. And ladies and gentlemen, you are not going to be disappointed by just the ridiculous showbiz, celebrity, Hollywood nature of this court case. I've got some great clips for you, all that coming your way and much more. OK, everybody, get in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Fast-moving show. There's loads of different things on the menu. But I'm going to get you to comment about the idea that Afghans, so people who fled the Taliban, genuine asylum seekers, many people would say, are going to be essentially evicted from their hotels and told to accept whatever accommodation they can or basically be made homeless. What do you make of that? GBViews at gbnews.uk. But right now, it's your headlines with the wonderful Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The top story this hour. The SNP leader Humza Yousaf has been officially selected now as Scotland's new First Minister, promising to never shy away from tackling the big issues facing his country. Mr Yousaf won the votes of 71 fellow MSPs, with members of the SNP and Greens backing his candidacy. The 37-year-old is replacing Nicola Sturgeon, who formally tendered her resignation to the King earlier after more than 8 years in the role. He promised to lay out his detailed policies to Holyrood after the April recess.
It is a really proud day for me and my family. I hope it's also a proud day for Scotland, as it speaks to our values as a country, as I stand here as the first ever Muslim to lead a Western democratic nation. You try telling that to 16-year-old Humza Yousaf, who post 9/11 was questioned constantly about his loyalty to this country. We have, presiding officer, collectively come a long way.
Humza Yousaf there. Now, MI5 has increased its terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. In a statement, Northern Ireland Minister Chris Heaton-Harris says an increase in terrorist-related activity in recent months has targeted police officers and put lives at risk. And it comes roughly a year after Britain lowered the threat level for Northern Ireland to substantial for the first time in more than a decade. Rishi Sunak has today been defending the level of funding allocated to the Ministry of Defence to rebuild ammunition stockpiles which have been run down by the war in Ukraine. The Prime Minister is currently facing questions from the Liaison Committee on his policies and his performance. Senior MPs will also ask him about record small boat crossings, soaring grocery bills and post-Brexit arrangements for Northern Ireland. Now, the Education Secretary is urging teaching unions to accept the latest pay offer and end their industrial action. The government's offering a £1,000 one-off payment and a 4.5% pay rise for next year. The National Education Union has recommended its members vote to reject the deal and will hold further strikes on April the 27th and May the 2nd if they do. But Gillian Keegan says this is the best offer they'll get.
We're going into exam season. Lots of young people and their parents are quite anxious at the moment, so we would very much hope that that the unions do not call more strike. It's disruptive for our children. They've been through enough. If this is not accepted, then what we will do is we will both go to the independent pay review body. Then they'll obviously look at things like retention and recruitment. They'll look at inflation and they'll come back with a recommendation. So that will be the normal process which we go through every year. So we'll revert to that process.
Jeremy Corbyn has now been banned from running as a Labour MP at the next general election. Labour's National Executive Committee has approved Sir Keir Starmer's motion to stop Mr Corbyn standing as a candidate. Mr Corbyn was suspended from the Parliamentary Party in 2020 over his reaction to a damning report into anti-Semitism, which found Labour had broken equalities law. He could still run, though, as an independent. A new report has found patient safety at one of the largest NHS trusts in the country could be at risk due to a corrosive staff culture. Workers at the University Hospital's Birmingham Trust told a local care board about mafia-like behaviour among senior leaders, calling them coercive and describing them in some cases as callous. The Trust has denied the allegations and staff said they'd been held in a fear of retribution if concerns were raised. It follows the death of a junior doctor whose father called the Trust a hypercritical environment to work within. Now, Prince Harry is once again at the High Court in London today for day 2 of preliminary hearings over multiple privacy claims against the publishers of the Daily Mail. The Duke of Sussex is among a group of high-profile people, including Sir Elton John and Sadie Frost, who are launching legal action against associated newspapers. Yesterday, the court heard how alleged unlawful actions of the newspaper group forced Prince Harry to cut off his friends. Associated Newspapers denies the allegations, which include hiring private investigators to record private phone calls. Just lastly, some international news for you. And Belarus says it'll host Russian tactical nuclear weapons after years of pressure from the US and NATO allies to change its political direction. Ukraine's neighbour defended its decision to cooperate with Russia, saying its capital has been forced to strengthen its security in the face of rising risk from the West. Belarus says the Russian nuclear plans announced by President Putin over the weekend would not break international nuclear agreements, as Belarus itself would not have control over the weapons. That's the latest news for you. I'm back in half an hour with your headlines. See you then.
OK, loads to get through as ever. Let's start with 2 big stories now about the housing of asylum seekers and refugees in the UK. And the government has announced that thousands of Afghan refugees have to leave hotels and accept accommodation that they're offered. Now, they've been living in hotels since fleeing the Taliban in August 2021, but there are fears that this could force many into homelessness. Meanwhile, there is growing discontent in Newquay, Cornwall, where a number of asylum seekers have been housed in a hotel. People concerned about public safety and everything else, frankly, as well. Let's speak now to our South West of England reporter, Jeff Moody, who's got more for us on this. Look, Jeff, thank you very much. I mean, I must say, the last reporter I went to was at a sweet shop. Now, you're on the beach. I'm starting to think I'm in the wrong job here, but there is, of course, a very serious undertone to what you're doing for us today. So go on, take it away.
Well, there is, absolutely. I mean, Newquay, I would say, is damaged at the moment. I mean, this is the surfer's paradise, isn't it? Surfer's heaven, where all of the tourists come in the summer. But the arrival of 200 migrants into the Beresford Hotel really has caused major issues for the town and the community. Firstly, there's the division. There are some people that say, look, you know, we welcome refugees here. We welcome people from other countries to come and visit the area. This is a safe haven for all. And then there's the other people that are saying, look, we don't know who these people are. We don't know where they've come from. We don't know their backgrounds. And there's growing unrest, growing feelings that people aren't safe. Now, that might be that they genuinely aren't safe, or it might be that they have that feeling that they don't know what's going on. They don't know who these people are. But either way, it's a genuine worry from a lot of people. So you've got people protesting on one side, and we've had two protests. One was last Sunday and the other was a couple of weeks before. So you've got the people protesting saying, look, why put them in a hotel in the middle of town, right in the middle of the community where we don't feel safe? And then you've got the other side saying, look, stop being xenophobic about it. We're allowed to, you know, we should be welcoming people here and doing our bit to help the situation. But then you get the people bust in. It's like a mini proxy war, if you like, taking place in Newquay, where you've got the anti-fascists. I mean, there were 150 anti-fascists that came down on Sunday. They were all masked and they were all very, very aggressive, calling everybody in sight a fascist, including me.
How do you live with yourself? Let the fascists go!
Newquay 2023, the surfer's paradise lost for the time being. Since some 200 migrants moved into the Beresford Hotel on the seafront, it's been a town on guard and divided. Those divisions now getting personal, getting angry, getting violent.
People here, I don't even know who they are, hurling abuse at locals, calling them fascists. Basically, it's caused a lot of unrest in the town. A lot of conflict. It's done a lot. It's not done very well for Newquay. You know, we've got a huge homeless problem in Newquay. We've got a huge homeless problem, and we've got people locals that are, you know, having a hard enough time as it is with the present living day crisis that's going on.
Homeless like this man.
I've been on the streets 20 years, and at the end of the day, like, they've been here 10 minutes or however long it took for them to get over here and then get on the register to be put into accommodation straight away with benefits and a phone and 3 meals a day and fed. And I think, what about the people, what about the servicemen that are out there that, like, fought for our country? What about, like, what about people that haven't got enough money to survive anymore?
The whole debate about where to house refugees, or in fact whether they are refugees at all or whether they're economic migrants, is one that now, for the people of Newquay, is beginning to sound personal. And it ties in with the whole issue of the cost of living. People here are finding life very tough at the moment, and it's getting emotional.
So we all should stick together as part of a team. It's not fair. It causes depression. But the thing is, the police are not helping at the minute with people that are depressed. And I'm suffering with depression myself. Sorry, I might get upset.
It feels too much for some. It feels they're losing their town. Some tell me they're afraid to speak up for fear of being called a fascist. Others tell me Cornwall's a welcoming county. Refugees welcome here, one and all.
If my family had to live like they have to live, I'd get in a boat and risk it. I really would.
In a statement, Newquay's MP Steve Double said what is deeply regrettable is that many of the people from both sides are not Newquay residents and travelled into the area in order to protest. I don't believe these people are reflective of the vast majority of people who live and work in Newquay, who in my experience have been incredibly tolerant of the whole situation. The divisions are certainly deep, the wounds raw. The hope is they can heal before the tourist season begins and Newquay can start surfing once more. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Yes, I mean, I imagine emotions will be running high at home for you now, ladies and gentlemen, seeing that, because, I don't know, I'm just going to give you my take on it. Do the anti-fascists understand how much like fascists they actually look? I mean, who are the people there wearing black masks over their face? You can't see their identity, hurling profanities. As far as I could tell from that clip, essentially a lot of middle-aged locals who were saying, I'm quite concerned about a load of men moving in down the road and what it might mean to my house prices or what it might mean for the tourist industry. I mean, it didn't really look to me as though the locals were behaving particularly like fascists, having genuine concerns about it, and the anti-fascist lot were maybe behaving in exactly the kind of way that they appear to hate. But there we go. GB Views at gbnews.uk. Let's cross live now, though, to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, for the latest on Prime Minister Rishi Sunak being questioned by senior MPs at the Commons Liaison Committee, and he hit a lot of different notes, didn't he, there, Darren? One of which is about a different story relating to the old Afghan asylum seekers, and that is the fact that they are going to be essentially turfed out of hotels and told to accept whatever accommodation they're given. Is that right?
Yeah, frankly, that is the nuts and bolts of what we've heard today from the government. Johnny Mercer, the Veterans Minister, making a statement in Parliament a little bit earlier on, effectively saying that, yes, 8,000 Afghan refugees who were effectively invited here, part of the refugee programme after the collapse of the Afghan government and the reinstallation of the Taliban back in 2021 are going to have to move out of those hotel accommodation and into independent housing. Now, the government and local authorities are going to help them find new housing. They're given 3 months to do so. The hotel accommodation costing 1.2 million quid a day. And Johnny Mercer didn't mince his words, essentially saying that this did need to come an end, saying that effectively that bridging hotels are not and were never designed to be a permanent solution, and that the lengthy delays in getting them rehoused to prevent some Afghans from properly putting down roots, committing to employment, integrating to communities, and has created uncertainty for thousands. Now, the Refugee Council have criticised this move, effectively saying that it is not proper and that they are deeply concerned by the plans. They warn it could leave thousands of Afghans who may well have worked alongside British forces in Afghanistan homeless. But as I say, the government is suggesting that they will help, along with local councils, to find accommodation, independent housing. They point out the fact that many of these Afghans have got large families, that hotels are simply not suitable. But in the end, I think the government have decided that, not least of all, the cost of this at £1.2 million a day was simply not sustainable.
Look, Darren, thank you very, very much for bringing us the latest on that. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor there, who has been watching this liaison committee. Now, we're moving on from this because big news for the people of Northern Ireland, as the Northern Ireland Secretary, Chris Heaton-Harris, has told the House of Commons that the terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland has been raised from substantial to severe. And the Cabinet Minister said while Northern Ireland has transformed into a peaceful society since the Troubles, a small number of people remain determined to cause harm to our communities through acts of politically motivated violence. And it comes, actually, this development, at a pretty seismic time for Northern Ireland. Let's cross live now to Belfast, where our GB News Northern Ireland reporter, Doogie Beattie, is with the latest. Yes, Doogie, please tell us what's going on there. Severe now, the terror threat.
Well, it is severe, and actually there is quite a few searches have been taking place inside Northern Ireland over the last few weeks since the attempted murder of DCI John Caldwell, who was shot in Omagh. Many front doors being put in across the province, some in loyalist areas, some in nationalist areas. And in fact, as we've come on the air, the PSNI have just released 2 statements, one saying that there were 2 arrests in the Ballamagorty area of Londonderry. That, of course, is into the new IRA, the nationalist organisation. And, of course, there's been ammunition found there. But on the other side of that coin, Newtown Ards in County Down, a loyalist area, there has been 2 arrests there as well. One of those men being held in Musgrave Street Police Station under the Anti-Terrorism Act. So, really, what has happened since those attempts on police lives, that there have been, the Anti-Terrorism Act has been used, which means that people can be held for much longer for questioning, and that warrants are much wider spanning, and they have been searching many houses, and of course loads of them are involved in organised crime, and sometimes there's a lot of blurred lines between a paramilitary organisation and organised crime. Well, all we can imagine at this time is that the Police Service of Northern Ireland and MI5 have gleaned a lot of information from those searches, and of course have now realised that they've been caught behind the 8 ball, and that these terrorists have a lot more weaponry and targeting in place than first initially thought. And of course, with the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement coming up in just a couple of weeks' time, and indeed the muted arrival of Joe Biden, the USA President, to celebrate that, it would be expected that there may be a terrorist attack right just before that would happen, for these people to turn around and say, basically, we haven't gone away. So all eyes now on terrorism back in Northern Ireland again, and of course a lot of that in unionist communities is in and around unsettlement over the protocol or the Windsor House documents. So that has created a political vacuum in Northern Ireland, and of course it must be said that all politicians from every shade and colour here in Northern Ireland have condemned this upgrading of the terror threat. They all think that it shouldn't be there.
Indeed. Look, Doogie, thank you very much. Doogie Beattie there, Northern Ireland reporter, bringing you the latest as that terror threat in Northern Ireland has been raised to severe. And as Doogie was saying as well, they are welcoming, well, supposedly anyway, welcoming Joe Biden, the US president, very shortly. And it does mark the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. So very poignant moments in the Northern Irish calendar. Now, Prince Harry is back in court for a second day of his privacy battle with the Daily Mail. Also, and I suspect you might enjoy this, Gwyneth Paltrow could appear in court in Utah. We are going to play you some clips of the highlights of, I mean, a typically American showbiz court hearing so far. You're not going to be disappointed. It's absolutely hilarious. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion. Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
OK, ladies and gents, now Oscar-winning actress Gwyneth Paltrow is on trial over a 2016 ski accident in Utah involving retired eye doctor Terry Sanderson, who claims that he has suffered life-changing injuries as a result of this crash. Now, Sanderson, who is 76, first filed a suit against Gwyneth 3 years after the accident for $3.1 million over what he deemed to be a, quote, hit and run. But that lawsuit was dismissed last May. So he's now suing for damages of around £250,000, that's pounds, and claims that she skied recklessly into him and left him there, causing a traumatic brain injury. But on the flip side, and it's important to say, I think, very much on the flip side, Gwyneth denies the charges and is counter-suing, claiming that Sanderson actually skied into her back and that Sanderson is suing because she is a famous celebrity. If you are wondering whether or not this is all a bit ridiculous, then you're right about that. Well, there was a moment where Gwyneth Paltrow was being cross-examined, and just again, want to emphasise this court case, of course, is taking place in America, the home of numerous different standout celebrity-based court cases, and this is, believe it or not, a little bit of Gwyneth Paltrow being, supposedly anyway, cross-examined.
Probably had a better ski outfit, though, I bet.
I still have the same one.
May I ask how tall you are?
I'm just under 5'10".
Okay, I am so jealous.
I think I'm shrinking, though.
You and me both. I have to wear 4-inch heels just to make it to 5'5".
Well,
so.
they're very nice.
Well, thank you. And you're not trained in accident reconstruction.
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Neither am I.
I was yelling at him.
Pretty loud. Pretty forceful.
I was pretty upset.
Right? You're small but mighty. Actually, you're not that small. Okay, and I'm assuming, and you're under oath here, that you're a good tipper.
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. I wouldn't expect anything less.
Oh, we're girls, we're friends. Oh, yeah. I'm not being funny, but if that lady was representing me, I'm not sure I'd be that happy about it. Anyway, joining me now is showbiz reporter Rebecca Twomey. Rebecca, this is bonkers.
Well, what else do you expect from a celebrity court case with someone as out of touch as Gwyneth Paltrow? And I think this court case just shows this actress, she's worth $200 million alone. She grew up in Hollywood. Her mum's Blythe Danner. Her dad was a big film hotshot. So it's hardly surprising. She called her child Apple and the other one Moses. So I think we can kind of assume that this is going to get a bit bizarre and a bit mad. And what was really interesting when Gwyneth took to the stand is last week when they asked her what impact the accident had on her, she said, "Oh, I lost half a day skiing."
Hang on,
Well,
Rebecca, let me stop you there. Let me stop you there, because
Yeah,
I actually think we've got a clip of exactly that bit. So Gwyneth Paltrow was being asked essentially what financial impact, OK, that this crash had on her. So I believe we can play the clip, can we? Let's have it. Go on. I think it's hilarious, this. Just to see if we can get it up now. No, we'll have to wait a moment. Oh, there we go. Let's play it. Come on.
And he has deterred you from enjoying the rest of what was a very expensive vacation.
Well, I lost half a day of skiing. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Your heart bleeds, Rebecca. Your heart bleeds, surely.
It's just golden. discussion. It's just the cheer up we all need, you know, considering all the rest of the news agenda and what you've just been speaking about. This is just a nice little interlude. It's the same thing when you look at Amber Heard and Johnny Depp in that case as well, and the Agatha Christie case that we had in the UK. Disappointingly, that wasn't televised, but it just goes to show how mad things can get, and it can only sometimes happen in America. And the counter-suing as well is quite a common thing now with celebrities. They did accuse Gwyneth of mimicking Taylor Swift, who infamously did that and won. So I think that's going to be quite a common theme with celebrities doing a bit of tit for tat, because it actually just makes them look superior when they counter-sue for such a small amount. Gwyneth Paltrow is asking for her legal fees and $1. So it is really just sort of a PR exercise. You'll see with Gwyneth as well in this court case, day one, I don't think she really thought how serious this was. She was dressed down in, you know, glasses and a jumper, quite casual, didn't see that face. And then we've seen Gwyneth perform a lot more, particularly obviously as we're seeing here when she took to the stand. She was very glam Hollywood, and she's a bit on a charm offensive because she's really got to protect her reputation here, because a lot of people think she's out of touch anyway. And then she's talking about, you know, she was so distraught from this crash she had to go and have a massage afterwards. I mean, well, you know, there's claims, you know, Terry Sanderson was knocked unconscious. It just does seem a bit ludicrous.
Yeah, no, look, it absolutely does. And, you know, I don't want to seem like I'm diminishing what Terry Sanderson has to say here. He is, in part, blaming this ski crash on the loss of his relationship with his partner, with losing friends and all of this, which I think many people might find difficult to get their heads around, but there we go. He is, of course, also after quite a lot of money. I mean, I recently got back from skiing, and I am now deeply concerned about the amount of money I might owe people for the way that I was behaving on the slopes. But there we go. All right, well, look, Rebecca, thank you very much for bringing us bang up to date with this ridiculous trial that's taking place at the minute. And it's worth noting as well that we will be throwing live to that trial. Gwyneth Paltrow is expected to take the stand at some point in a matter of moments, so we're going to be giving you the latest gold that emerges from that court. Look, thank you very, very much. Great, as always, to have you on the show. Rebecca Twomey there, who is a showbiz guru. Right, OK, so we're going to go from one trial to another, because it's day two of Prince Harry's appearance at the High Court in London over the case of alleged phone tapping by the publisher of the Daily Mail. Now, yesterday, the Duke of Sussex made a surprise appearance at the court alongside Sir Elton John, who's also bringing legal action against Associated Newspapers. It's believed to be the first time the Duke has been in the UK since the funeral of the late Queen in September. With me now is GBNews' national reporter, Ellie Costello, who has been all over this story for us. Ellie, right, well, from one trial to another, this one, I think, possibly quite a lot more serious than Gwyneth Paltrow's. What's going on where you are?
Yes, unfortunately not as exciting as the Gwyneth Paltrow case, I'm afraid, today, especially today. Not very much going on in court today, lots of legal jargon, but we did still have the star quality and the excitement about Prince Harry arriving for day two of this preliminary hearing. He did make his way through the side entrance today, though, Patrick, which was probably wise advice from his security after we saw Prince Harry bump into a photographer yesterday in that media scrum heading into the front door of the Royal Court of Justice. So he made his way through the side entrance today, but he still continued to wave and smile to the waiting press. He does want to be seen by the media to be attending this court case. This is a personal campaign of Prince Harry, something he feels very passionately about, which is fighting press intrusion into his life. Well, another claimant who was in court today was Baroness Lawrence. She is the mother of Stephen Lawrence, who was murdered as a teenager in 1993. She's another one of the claimants in this case. Now, her lawyers allege that Associated Newspapers, which is the publishers of the Mail, they got hold of information about the investigation into her son's killing through bugging and covert surveillance, including the intercepting of her voicemail messages and paying corrupt police officers for information. Now, Associated Newspapers deny any of those claims, but we did see at lunchtime Prince Harry went over and hugged Baroness Lawrence, and the two of them chatted for quite a long time during the lunchtime break. They are clearly close and united in that fight to take a stand against press intrusion. Well, Associated Newspapers have given a statement. They say they are profoundly saddened. And they point to Baroness Lawrence, especially they say that they're saddened that she has been persuaded to bring a case against them. They say they were hugely proud at the Daily Mail of their pivotal role in campaigning for justice for Stephen Lawrence. And they go on to say that they deny any allegations against them. They want this case to be thrown out of court. And that's what this preliminary hearing is all about, Patrick. Should it be thrown out or should it proceed to a full trial? But this hearing is set to last until Thursday.
Oh, there we go. Ellie, thank you very much. Ellie Costello there, GB News' national reporter with all the latest from the Prince Harry High Court stuff. Now, there's loads more still to come. Between now and 5 o'clock, the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has been blocked from standing as an MP at the next election, a Labour MP. Is Sir Keir Starmer being anti-democratic? And this might leave a sour taste in your mouth. The price of chocolate and all things sweet is rocketing. And we'll find out exactly why very, very shortly. Bad news, I think. Bad news for people like me who love an Easter egg, or three. But first, it's time for your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you. The headlines this hour. MI5 has increased its terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. In a statement, the Northern Ireland Minister, Chris Heaton-Harris, cited an increase in terrorist-related activity in recent months, which has targeted police officers and put lives at risk. It comes roughly a year after Britain lowered the threat level for Northern Ireland to substantial for the first time in more than a decade.
The candidate selected as the Parliament's nominee for the position of First Minister is Humza Yousaf.
That's the moment the SNP leader Humza Yousaf was officially selected as Scotland's First Minister today, promising to never shy away from tackling the big issues facing the country. Mr Yousaf won the votes of 71 fellow MSPs, with members of the SNP and Greens backing his candidacy as well. The 37-year-old is replacing Nicola Sturgeon, who formerly tendered her resignation to the King earlier after more than 8 years in the role. The Education Secretary is urging teaching unions to accept the latest pay offer and end industrial action. The government's offering a £1,000 one-off payment and a 4.5% pay rise for next year. The National Education Union has recommended its members vote to reject the deal and will hold further strikes on April the 27th and May the 2nd. But Gillian Keegan, the Education Secretary, says this is the best offer teachers can expect. And Jeremy Corbyn has been banned from running as a Labour MP at the next general election. Labour's National Executive Committee has approved Sir Keir Starmer's motion to stop Mr Corbyn standing as a candidate. Mr Corbyn was suspended from the parliamentary party in 2020 over his reaction to a damning report into anti-Semitism, which found Labour had broken equalities law. He could still run, though, as an independent. Those are your latest news headlines at just after 4:30. I'm back at 5 with your news. See you then.
OK, welcome back. Now, I've just got a little bit of time to delve into my inbox. Thank you very much, everyone who's been getting in touch. GBviews at gbnews.uk. No surprise that the majority of my emails that I've been getting have been around a couple of the stories relating to the rehoming of asylum seekers. So the first one is in Newquay, where the people of Cornwall, some of them anyway, are getting very, very annoyed about the backlash to an asylum seeker hotel that has popped up there. It's interesting, this case, because Antifa, the anti-fascists, bust in, apparently, about 150 people to stand outside this hotel wearing balaclavas and face coverings and black clothing, waving flags, calling everyone a frothing racist, even though they're not from the area. And then the locals were just standing there, really, many of them just middle-aged or quite elderly with, I think, quite reasonable concerns, like, well, you know, how many young men have just moved in next door? What's it going to do to the house prices and public safety in the area? Tourism and the impact that it might have. We've got Ian, who's been on. He says, if it was me, I'd be quite upset as well, but I certainly am not a fascist. Yes, Ian, there we go. Thank you very much. There's rather a lot of that going on. The other one as well is about the Afghan refugees. Now, this is an interesting one because it's two different sets of asylum seeker stories here. And the one that's taking place, we're going to talk about it very shortly, is about Afghan asylum seekers who fled the Taliban. So, look, many people would say these are quotes-unquote, genuine asylum seekers, because I know that a lot of people think that quite a few people coming across the channel are less so. So these people genuinely fled the Taliban a couple of years ago and have been put in hotel accommodation ever since. Now, the government has said to them they're going to be moved out of this hotel and these hotels, and they're going to be placed into other accommodation. Now, they have to accept that accommodation. They don't really have a choice. It's that or essentially become homeless. And I was asking whether or not you think that's fair. And Linda says, am I correct in thinking the Afghan war is over? That being the case, should they not necessarily maybe go home? Linda, I would say, just politely, I do share some strong views about the asylum seeker crisis that's taking place in Britain at the minute. I do think it's probably a little bit rum to ask people to actually go back to Afghanistan, because a lot of these people, again, it must be reinforced, were people like Afghan interpreters, so people who genuinely did help us during the war effort over there and probably would be killed if they went back. So maybe when it comes to these people now, it's not as simple as it is potentially with some people from Albania, say. Look, loads of you getting in touch on that. Keep your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. The UK spent billions fighting for the Afghan people, costing hundreds of servicemen's lives. This is from Ed, who thinks that we've paid enough already. Well, Ed, if you feel like we've paid enough already, then it's a big problem for you, because we're going to keep paying for them, aren't we? Because it's not just the case that the hotel costs are going to be reduced. Yeah, all right, they will be reduced by virtue of them not being in the hotel. But what kind of housing are they going to go into? One would imagine it will be social housing or housing at the lower end of the rental sector, or in some councils, and this has been controversial as well, some local councils are building new housing specifically for Ukrainian and Afghan refugees. This has prompted quite a large backlash from people, especially, by the way, younger people who are thinking, well, you're not going to build housing for me. You can't build housing for a load of people who are already here, but you can build it for other people as well. So how does that quite work out? So it's interesting, really, because I think a lot of the younger people who tend to maybe be more of the Refugees Welcome Brigade are actually quite annoyed at some of the local councils for building accommodation specifically for the refugees. So there we go. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Keep those views coming in. It's strong stuff in the inbox, and we love to see it. Right, moving on, though. Jeremy Corbyn has been blocked from standing as a Labour candidate at the next general election, with Keir Starmer confirming the move at a meeting of the party's ruling body, the NEC. Corbyn will not be endorsed as a formal Labour candidate. He's currently representing Islington North, obviously, as an independent after losing the party whip over his stance on anti-Semitism. Jeremy Corbyn has said that Sir Keir had denigrated the democratic foundations of Labour by trying to block him from standing. Joining me now to analyse what this could mean for Labour's election chances is Professor Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. Thank you very much. John, so, look, this in itself might be quite bad news for Labour, because Jeremy Corbyn presumably could well win that seat of Islington North on his own as an independent, no?
That's going to be pretty tough. It's such a safe seat that the irony of that is that, therefore, Mr Corbyn has to get a very large proportion of the vote to have a good chance of defeating the Labour candidate. So I'm sure he will do creditably, but the history of independent candidates trying to hang on to their seats, well, it's been done once or twice, but it's very, very difficult to do.
OK, but I think a national picture for Labour is looking quite good, boosted massively by what we've just seen in Scotland.
Perhaps. Certainly Mr Yousaf is not popular in the way that Nicola Sturgeon was. And it's also true that the Labour Party is now only running about 10 points behind the SNP in the most recent polls of Westminster voting intention. That said, it has to be remembered that a lot of people in Scotland are still voting primarily on the basis of the constitutional question, whether they're for or against independence. Labour support is nearly 3 times higher amongst those who voted no in 2014 than it is amongst those who voted yes. And to that extent, at least, if Labour are going to make further progress in narrowing the SNP's lead, I think in truth they've got to start persuading voters to leave aside the constitutional question to a much greater extent than they have managed to do so far. So yes, the opportunity is there, but it's not by no means guaranteed to give Labour a rich reward. I suppose certainly managed to increase their seats north of the border above the one that they currently have.
OK, all right. So it could be fascinating to see whether or not the wider public think that Keir Starmer has done a good thing here by continuing to biff Jeremy Corbyn. Because, actually, a lot of people are thinking it maybe makes Keir Starmer look quite untrustworthy. He tried to get this guy elected for a long period of time. He stood side by side with him, and then now all of a sudden he's saying, no, he's toxic, I want nothing to do with him. So can we trust Keir?
Well, certainly it's the case that Sir Keir Starmer has moved quite a long way from the character of the campaign that he fought to become party leader back in the spring of 2020. But the fact that you've referred to those arguments about Sir Keir having backed Jeremy Corbyn to become Prime Minister, etc., perhaps is one of the reasons why this motion has been brought forward, largely symbolic, as I think it is, because the truth is that for so long as Sir Keir denied Jeremy Corbyn the whip as a Labour MP, then Jeremy Corbyn was not going to be able to stand as a Labour candidate anyway. But I think the truth is that probably in part what Sir Keir doing is responding to the Conservative Party, is saying, well, whatever happened in the past, you can now be clear that I have drawn a clear a demarcation line between myself and Jeremy Corbyn, and is therefore trying to limit the force of that Conservative accusation, which is brought up at virtually every Prime Minister's questions.
Good stuff. All right, thank you very much, Sir John Curtis there. Professor Sir John Curtis, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, just outlining what all this means for the Labour Party going forward. Look, some fantastic emails coming in relating to that top story as well that we're covering about Afghan refugees being moved out of a hotel, or hotels, I should say, and then essentially being placed into local housing and being told they've got to accept that housing or basically risk being homeless. Hi, Patrick. My nephew has no job. He has a wife and a son. He lives in a caravan, so not a hotel. Can he get housed with free everything as well as these so-called refugees? No, I thought not. And that's from David. And David, look, firstly, I hope everything gets sorted out for you and indeed your nephew. But this is not an uncommon view at the moment in the inbox. Keep those views coming in. The soaring cost of Easter eggs, though, moving on. What's that all about? We'll be finding out. Why? I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are. We don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
OK, welcome back. Now, food inflation hit record highs again this morning, with shoppers predicted to face around £800 more on their annual grocery shopping bill. But the Bank of England governor says gaps in the labour market are to blame for the financial pressures, blaming early retirement for contributing to rising inflation and higher interest rates. Look, Liam Halligan is here to cut through the noise on this with On the Money. Liam, you've got some figures, but I understand since we last spoke, you've been rummaging in the undergrowth a little bit.
I've been rummaging in the undergrowth like David Bellamy, who you didn't even know who he was, which shows your age. So, look, we were talking about food price inflation. Let's talk about food price inflation a little bit more. Here are the numbers that came out this morning. They're not official numbers. They're from a private sector consultancy called Cantor. They're numbers for March, before March has even ended, but they are authoritative. Shows that food price inflation, 17.5% up on March 2022, a basket of goods. That's much, much higher than general inflation across the board for all goods and services, which was 10.4% in February. So you can see there the gap between general inflation and food price inflation. Cantor say that the average family, because of this food price inflation, is spending more than 850 quid 837 quid more on their annual food shopping bill, and the kind of foods that have gone up the most are eggs, dairy, cheese and so on. But look, we've got this food price inflation. I talk to lots of farmers, they get in touch with me, and farmers are keen to say that it's not that their margins are high. Farmers are saying that they're finding it really hard to pass on the higher input costs like fuel and fertiliser and so on. And a lot of farmers I talk to, they say, yeah, food price inflation is really high, but in general, wholesale food prices are coming down, but look at the profitability of supermarkets. A lot of farmers are saying to me that at least some of this ongoing food price inflation is because supermarket profitability is unusually high. Now, the supermarkets would deny that. They'd say, oh, we were a competitive business. There's lots of competition between the various supermarkets. But it's something I'm going to look into more because it concerns me that ordinary men and women, ordinary households are paying really through the nose for their food. Still, even though wholesale commodities, wheat, all the rest of it on global markets, the price of those has come down a lot in the last few months, particularly compared to this time last year after the spike in the war in Ukraine when that began in February. So I'm concerned about what's happening in the supply chain for food, because I personally think that a lot of farmers are getting a raw deal.
Gosh. All right, Liam, look, thank you very much. As ever, Liam Halligan, now our economics and business editor. Now, we're going to get a little bit more on this and drill down into one of my favourite topics, which is things that are bad for me, so sweets and chocolates and anything with sugar in it, really. Liam's off. Ray Addison joins me now. He's our South East of England reporter, and he's at a sweet shop in Belmont, which I think we can all agree is a tough day out for Ray. Ray, how is it there?
Yeah, it's great, Patrick. Yeah, Phil let me stay here in the shop, so I've had the run of the place. He left earlier, which was maybe a mistake. I've got myself some jazzies, some fish and chips, and some Dracula teeth as well. So that's supper sorted. But yeah, I've been talking to shopkeepers around Sussex and Surrey, sweet shop owners, and they've been telling me that they've seen the prices of their stock go up by between 30 and 70%, and some items have disappeared as well. They've just become unavailable. Things like sweet peanuts, for example, they're not able to find anymore. Customers too, they're buying less, Patrick. And as an independent business, it's very hard because, of course, the supermarkets generally have lower prices. For example, here at Charlie's Sweet Stop in Belmont, they don't bother stocking Easter eggs because they're never going to be able to sell them for as cheaply as supermarkets will, and so they choose not to do that. And of course, general costs of being a trader have gone up. You know, electricity and energy costs and rent and rates, everything's going up, just making it difficult. Earlier on, I was over in Sussex and I was chatting to shoppers about why they're not, or buying, why they are or are not choosing, rather, Patrick, to buy Easter eggs this year.
Bought them yet, but I will be buying them. I don't notice any difference, actually. I don't know if I've looked properly, maybe, but I certainly will be getting them. Yeah, definitely.
No, I haven't bought any at the moment yet because I feel the price for a medium-sized Easter egg is quite expensive. There didn't seem to be many deals.
No, we've seen the prices go up and we won't consider buying them anyway.
So I think they have gone up quite a bit. Like everything else, I think the inflation's hitting everybody, isn't it?
Patrick, as you know, obviously, this has all happened because of the spike in sugar costs. It's had that impact on the high street. However, harvests, we're hearing, are improving and have been improving over the last few months. And so they are likely to come down soon, but obviously not before Easter Sunday.
Ray, all right, thank you very, very much. Ray Addison there is reporting to us, believed it or not, from a sweet shop in Belmont, and hopefully the Easter Bunny does come for everybody who's watching. I'm sure he will. Anyway, right, families living near a number of... Get a load of this. Families living near a number of sinkholes in a Norfolk village have banned their children from playing outside over fears that they may disappear and be sucked into the earth. Residents who live in 2 areas of Thorpe Hamlet say that they are plagued by the holes which keep appearing near their homes. So homeowners say the problem will only get worse as the affected areas, which are made up of sand and chalk, if essential work's not carried out quickly. I mean, look, it's a dangerous world out there for kids at the moment. I didn't think sinkholes was the main issue, but there we go. Joining me now is someone who knows an awful lot about sinkholes. It is Carmen Solana, who is a reader of volcanology and risk communication. So thank you very much. Oh, well, I mean, good grief. So basically, people in Norfolk are telling their kids to not go outside in case the earth eats them alive.
Yes, well, that's apparently that's the news. It's a difficult one, to be honest, with sinkholes, isn't it? Sinkholes can appear at any time, and we don't really know where the next one is going to open. So I suspect that uncertainty is difficult to cope with for parents. Yes, I think you're showing some images of sinkholes, and that's exactly what happens.
I've got to ask, look, realistically, how worried should we be? I will confess, I've never seen a sinkhole. It's not something that's ever really crossed my mind. Is this happening more and more now? Should we be worried?
Well, Norfolk has always had a problem with sinkholes. It's a known UK area for sinkholes. It's exactly what you were saying. You have chalk, you have sand. None of those rocks are especially hard. They dilute very quickly with water. And what happens is that you get underground passages where this water keeps basically taking away part of the sand, part of the chalk, and eventually the top cannot hold the ground and sinks.
Right, OK. And, I mean, what can we do to stop the plight of the sinkhole in the Norfolk area?
Ah, that's a million pounds question. It's very difficult. You can put some grout in, and you can sort of refill those holes. And I think that's what has been done previously. But unfortunately, we live in a very wet country. So if the conditions were different, if it was to be drier, there will be less likely to happen. But with water, this will carry on occurring, unfortunately.
Look, what would your message to the fair people of Norfolk be? Because, you know, from where I'm sitting now, I think you can't just live your life wondering whether or not you're going to end up getting sucked into a sinkhole. You know, you can't live your life wondering whether or not you're going to get hit by a bus. You can't live your life wondering about whether or not Mother Earth is going to eat you alive. You know, I think you've just got to crack on, haven't you?
Well, yes. I mean, after really wet periods, if you maybe, you know, if you're really worried, that's fine. But when it is dry, it's okay. And it tends to be heavy objects on top of the ground that cause these sinkholes. They can be very fast happening, but sometimes they're just slow. What you start seeing is like basically the ground sinking. Is not always a hole that occurs almost immediately.
Look, Carmen, thank you very much for explaining exactly what sinkholes are, how they're caused, why Norfolk is affected, and exactly how terrified of them we should be. Excellent stuff. Carmen Solana there, who's a reader in volcanology and risk communication. And, I mean, fantastic, isn't it? There we go. I must say, I have never honestly really spent any amount of time worrying about sinkholes, but maybe that's just because I don't hang around Norfolk that much. Here we go. Sean's been in touch. I brush my teeth every morning and every night. The water runs down the sinkhole. Sorry for being silly. Sean, yeah? It's a highbrow show, this, mate. OK? If you're going to get in touch, keep it real. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I've got loads coming your way and much, much more, ladies and gentlemen, including a lot of people who are getting in touch about the Easter egg prices going up. People complaining, this must be a thing, people complaining the prices are going up, but the amount of chocolate you're getting for your money is going down. Can that really be right? I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News. Stay tuned.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back, everybody. It's just gone 5 p.m. and you're watching me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. I've got an action-packed final hour of this show. Here's what's on the menu. So, Afghan asylum seekers, thousands of them, have been told they're going to have to leave the hotels they've been staying in and just accept whatever accommodation they're given or render themselves homeless. Do you think that's fair enough? It does also come as there is growing discontent in Cornwall now. Just add that to the list of places at migrant hotels there. And yes, very shortly, we're expecting to take a press conference live from Northern Ireland with police chiefs there because the terror threat has been raised to severe just before Joe Biden visits. And in fact, right on cue, we're going to go live now to Northern Ireland where police are holding a press conference in light of the increased terror threat.
And it means that the threat in Northern Ireland from national security has moved from likely to attack is highly likely. This is part of an ongoing process of monitoring the threat in Northern Ireland, which is conducted by MI5. We have spoken publicly about the number of attacks that have taken place in recent months. Indeed, there have been 7 attacks since the threat was altered in March 22. Not least, most recently, the attack on my colleague DCI John Caldwell in February. It's important for me to say to the community today that the PSNI, supported by partners, will relentlessly pursue those who seek to cause harm and terrorise our community, and those who seek to attack police officers and other members of the security services here in Northern Ireland. I want to pay tribute to the community today for their fortitude in having to deal with this threat level, and also to my colleagues and friends in the police service and other services who will work against this threat. We're not going to be deterred from providing our visible, accessible, responsive policing to the community. We're determined not to go backwards. Northern Ireland has made great progress over the last number of years, as has policing. The threat level was severe for a number of years. Unfortunately, we are somewhat used to it, but it doesn't mean we accept it. It means we have to work even harder to get it to a level that is far more acceptable, which effectively means the eradication of terrorism and so forth from our communities. And we're determined to do that in a way that supports communities and works with communities. Thank you. No, well, what this means is that attacks now are highly likely. So we've seen a number of attacks really over the last 6-7 months. And so the message to Northern Ireland today and to the police service and to other partners is attacks are likely. And certainly the message to those of us who are sort of at the front of this, certainly the police service, is that we have to treat this threat seriously, but we will respond accordingly.
Do you have the budget to be able to deal with this?
So our national security effort is funded through additional security funding, and that has been baseline for the next 3 years. So, we have the money to deal with this, but we are on record in saying that resources and money for the entirety of policing is under a lot of strain. So I want to reassure people that we have stepped things up over the last month. We will continue to face into this. There might come a point where we have to make some difficult choices, but we're going to prioritise keeping Northern Ireland safe and prioritise issues like this and prioritise keeping our officers safe to deliver effective policing. I mean, the main thing here about this threat for the police service is making sure we get to calls, that we deal with domestic violence, we deal with sexual offences, we deal with road traffic order stuff, we deal with antisocial behaviour. So we're there for you, our community. And in doing so, we have to take measures to protect ourselves, because we do know that there is a small group of people, and they're very small, but who would be keen to murder police officers to do that. And what they're trying to do here, folks, beyond no illusions, is to stop policing. They want people not to be prosecuted for all the offences I've just talked about. And so our job, my job, is to make sure that we serve you properly, keep the community safe, and in doing so, we will bring the resources to bear to keep our officers safe and the community safe to do that.
The ambition may be there, the budgetary constraints are there, something will have to give at some stage.
There's always the possibility of something giving at some stage, but this is a high priority for us. And I don't want anybody listening to this today who's intent on carrying out terrorist attacks to think that we are going to be anything less than entirely focused and entirely relentless in stopping them and bringing them to justice. Well, the primary focus of these attacks is your police service. So you should be worried for your police service. We've also, the last 10 years, seen your prison service attacked as well. So if you care about a police service, then you should be worried. I wouldn't encourage people to be hugely concerned about their own safety broader than that. This is mainly focused upon the likes of the police service and the prison service and other agencies. But the community should be concerned that terrorists want to disrupt our life, that they want to carry out attacks, that they want to stop effective policing, they want to stop effective justice system, and therefore we should all be concerned about that.
Is there any renewed advice then for police officers in the wake of this that will be raised?
Well, Mark, we gave out advice to our officers and our staff after John was shot. And we are encouraging our officers to be vigilant. We are encouraging them to not set patterns where they can, and all the usual advice that we give. But equally, we're also encouraging our officers not to deter from serving the community. I mean, we want to protect our public, and we're going to do that. And sometimes that puts us at risk. And that's why you have a group of very courageous men and women in the police service, supported by police staff, who every day come in and out of these buildings with one thing in mind: to protect you, our community, from these sort of people. So we're going to do that.
How closely linked do you think the paramilitaries are with organised crime?
Certainly, if you're talking about loyalist paramilitaries, I think there's really, really close links. We do see some links in the Republican paramilitary arena.
OK, all right. So what you've been watching and listening to there is Mark Hamilton, who's Deputy Chief Constable at PSNI, just reacting to the fact that the terror threat in Northern Ireland has been raised to severe. It does come as Joe Biden is planning on visiting very, very soon, and as well it's going to be the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement. He wanted to make it abundantly clear to everyone, all the members of the public in Northern Ireland, that they are actually, unfortunately, quite used to a very severe terror threat. That doesn't mean they accept it, though. They have stepped up policing, they have increased their resources, and they will still do their best to make sure that they have the resources to deal with the increased terror threat, as well as just all the other crime that's taking place there. So that's the latest from Northern Ireland. That's the breaking news, that the Northern Ireland terror threat has been raised to severe, and that is what the Deputy Chief Constable, Mark Hamilton, had to say about it. But there's loads more to get through this hour, ladies and gents. Let's not hang around. We start with two big stories about the housing of asylum seekers and refugees in the UK. The government has announced that thousands of Afghan refugees will have to leave hotels, around 9,000 of them actually, and accept whatever accommodation they are offered. If they do not accept the accommodation, essentially they will be made homeless. Now, these people have been living in hotels since fleeing the Taliban in August 2021, and it is important to draw a distinction between these people and people, say, from Albania, for example, in the main, who are coming across the channel, etc. So these people did flee the Taliban in August 2021 and have been living in British hotels ever since. But there are fears now, apparently, this could force many of them into homelessness. What do you make of all of this? Meanwhile, there's growing discontent in Newquay, where a number of asylum seekers have been housed in a hotel, and there were absolutely bonkers protests, which involved people from Antifa, the anti-fascist group, being bussed in from outside the area, dressed in black balaclavas and masks and hurling obscenities at people who were just local people there, which I think we can all agree, if anything, maybe makes them look a little bit fascist. But there we go. Jeff Moody joins us now, and he's our South West of England reporter. Yes, and you've come away from the beach, Jeff. Where are you now? What's going on?
Well, I'm outside the Beresford Hotel, which was the scene of the trouble at the weekend and the protests the few weeks before. You know, Patrick, whenever you go to a community like this and try and talk to people, people are always a bit reluctant to talk to us. But here in Newquay, everybody has been approaching us throughout the day, wanting to tell us what's going on, wanting their voice to be heard. There are so many issues here. There's a big problem with homelessness. There's a big problem with the cost of living crisis. It seems to be biting here harder than in a lot of places. All over Cornwall, it's the same sort of situation. But then there's the problems with the hotel behind me. There are some that are saying that, you know, the Cornish motto, one and all, we welcome everybody, let's be as accommodating as we can and as patient as we can, while the government look to put them in more suitable housing. There are others that are saying, look, we're frightened to go on the streets at night. We don't know who these people are. Our daughters are in danger. They're having self-defense classes. But then, as you say, there's the mob that appears to be bussed in. We don't know where they're coming from. But what we do know is that at the weekend, there were around 150 of them, all wearing balaclavas, wearing masks, being extremely aggressive, shouting abuse at the locals and calling everybody, including me and this channel, calling us all fascists.
How do you live with yourself? Let the fascists go and you nick someone?
Newquay 2023. The surfers' paradise lost for the time being. Since some 200 migrants moved into the Beresford Hotel on the seafront, it's been a town on guard and divided. Those divisions now getting personal, getting angry, getting violent.
People here, I don't even know who they are, hurling abuse at locals, calling them fascists. Basically, it's caused a lot of unrest in the town, a lot of conflict. It's done a lot. It's not done very well for Newquay. You know, we've got a huge homeless problem in Newquay. We've got a huge homeless problem, and we've got people locals that are, you know, having a hard enough time as it is with the present living day crisis that's going on.
Homeless like this man.
I've been on the streets 20 years, and at the end of the day, like, they've been here 10 minutes or however long it took for them to get over here and then get on the register to be put into accommodation straight away with benefits and a phone and 3 meals a day and fed. And I think, what about the people? What about the servicemen that are out there that, like, fought for our country? What about people that haven't got enough money to survive anymore?
The whole debate about where to house refugees, or in fact whether they are refugees at all or whether they're economic migrants, is one that now, for the people of Newquay, is beginning to sound personal. And it ties in with the whole issue of the cost of living. People here are finding life very tough at the moment, and it's getting emotional.
So we all should stick together as part of a team.
It's not fair. It causes depression. But the thing is, the police are not helping at the minute with people that are depressed. And I'm suffering with depression myself. Sorry, I might get upset.
It feels too much for some. It feels they're losing their town. Some tell me they're afraid to speak up for fear of being called a fascist. Others tell me Cornwall's a welcoming county. Refugees welcome here, one and all.
If my family had to live like they have to live, I'd get in a boat and risk it. I really would.
In a statement, Newquay's MP Steve Double said what is deeply regrettable is that many of the people from both sides are not Newquay residents and travelled into the area in order to protest. I don't believe these people are reflective of the vast majority of people who live and work in Newquay, who in my experience have been incredibly tolerant of the whole situation. The divisions are certainly deep, the wounds raw. The hope is they can heal before the tourist season begins and Newquay can start surfing once more. Jeff Moody, GB News.
Yes, indeed. Well, I'm going to take you over now to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's going to talk to us a bit about the fact that some Afghan asylum seekers have been told that they're going to have to move out of the hotel accommodation that they've been in since fleeing the Taliban around 20 months ago, and they're going to have to accept whatever accommodation that they're given, basically. And if they don't do that, then they're going to be made homeless. And this has caused a lot of controversy, not least in the inbox, actually, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Darren, yeah, I mean, is this really practical? Where are these people going to live? What do we know about it?
Well, it's been announced by the government this afternoon. Essentially, they've given up to 8,000 Afghan refugees a 3-month notice period, saying that the current temporary accommodation of hotels that's costing 1.2 million quid a day is no longer sustainable and that these Afghans will need to find new accommodation. Now, the government is clearly going to help with that, as are local councils. The expectation, the hope is, of course, that none of these people will end up homeless. They effectively were given safe passage to the UK after the fall of the Afghan government in the summer of 2021 when the Taliban rolled in their tanks to Kabul. Many of them, of course, will have helped British forces during the war in the noughties. And in the end, the government's argument about this is that it's not doing the government any good, it's not doing taxpayers any good, but ultimately, Johnny Mercer this afternoon, the Veteran Secretary, also saying it's not doing the Afghan refugees themselves any good. He said in the House of Commons that bridging hotels are not and were never designed to be a permanent solution. He says the lengthy delays in getting them rehoused has prevented some Afghans from properly putting down roots, committing to employment, integrating into communities, and has created uncertainty for thousands. Now, this news will be welcomed by some, particularly those that feel that the cost is unsustainable, but for others, they fear that it goes too far. The Refugee Council this afternoon saying they're deeply concerned by the plans, saying that it could leave people at risk of homelessness. In the end, I think this has come down to a practical decision made by the government that it can no longer afford to house these refugees in hotels, that it is just not politically expedient, that those rooms might be needed for other refugees. But also, the big question facing the government is, will there be enough accommodation across the country to move these Afghan refugees into? Because in the end, many of them will have large families, and we know that for most people in this country, there's a bit of a housing crisis, so it will be an uphill task for central government and indeed for local councils too.
We've spoken a lot about this issue about the Afghan asylum seekers being moved out into the communities, and I've been getting views on that. I'm going to be going to the inbox shortly, but Rishi Sunak was actually grilled is probably a bit too strong a word, isn't it? Politely questioned at the liaison committee about a variety of different other things as well, wasn't he? So what took place there for us?
Yeah, he was indeed 1 hour, 45 minutes of grilling by the top MPs in Parliament. When I say top MPs, I mean they're the chairs of the various different select committees that shadow the government departments here in Parliament. And there were lots of discussions about the economy, about the state of public services, strikes, etc. But there was also continued focus on the small boats crisis, with the Prime Minister defending the use of the word invasion by the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, in describing the small boats crisis. Actually, it's a question I put to the Prime Minister when I was with him in the US a couple of weeks ago, his answer essentially saying that in the end, things were getting pretty tough in the channel in terms of the numbers involved, going up 3-4-fold from what we saw a couple of years ago. Though in the end, he also wouldn't commit to numbers that might be sent through Rwanda. Overall, whether it was on immigration or whether it was on the economy or the commitments that he's made as Prime Minister, it was a bit of a snooze fest. I kind of suggested it would be a little bit earlier on today. He's quite good at the detail, Rishi Sunak, whatever you think about him. He was able to bat away most of the questions, didn't make any major gaffes. Sometimes it can be quite difficult, these grillings by the select committee chairs. I think Rishi Sunak would be pleased with his performance this afternoon.
Thank you very, very much. It's never a snooze fest when you're around, Darren. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor there from Westminster. Right, OK. Now, in the last 10 minutes, the Deputy Chief Constable of the Police Service in Northern Ireland addressed a press conference in Belfast. The terror threat in Northern Ireland has now been raised to severe, and he said there is a small number of people who want to kill police officers. It comes following, as I've just said, that threat being raised to severe, and a small number of dissident Republicans determined to use politically motivated violence. I'm just quoting now what the police chief said there. MI5 increased the threat from substantial to severe, which means it deems an attack to be highly likely. And the move comes after a series of incidents targeting security forces in Northern Ireland, including the attempted murder of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell in Omagh last month. Joining me now, I'm very pleased to say, from Belfast, is the editor of the newsletter. It's Ben Lowry. Ben, thank you very much for getting up at very short notice for us, actually, I must say. Right, what's the mood like at the moment, really? Is there any surprise that this terror threat is severe now? Or, forgive me about this, but are you a bit used to it?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I don't think that the mood is bad, and I don't think that the mood is bad in Northern Ireland because, yes, I think Northern Ireland is used to an unusual security situation to the rest of the UK. Of course, people under the age of 40 really don't have much of a memory of the Troubles, which ended the first IRA ceasefires in 1994, and it was sort of largely over by 1998, by the time of the Belfast Agreement, 25th anniversary is coming up. But I think it is an unusual society, does have an unusual security situation, so I don't think that the public mood would be concerned. I do think, however, that the public mood when Detective Chief Inspector Caldwell was shot in February last month in Omagh, I think there was, alarm. And of course, people are always worried, could this mean a rapid return to violence?
No, indeed. Now, it would appear that whilst the terror threat has been raised to severe, from what we can gather from that police press conference that we had earlier on, the threat mainly does seem to be centred at attacks to police officers and security services, which would indicate that your average man and woman in Northern Ireland going about their daily business, fingers crossed, wouldn't be in the firing line, really.
Oh, yeah, I think it's important to say that. I think it's also important to say that during the Troubles in Northern Ireland, and I've grown up and spent almost all of my life in Northern Ireland. I don't want to downplay it, but most years during the Troubles, more people were killed in road accidents than were killed in violence. So it was a very traumatic time for Northern Ireland, but it was never at the level of civil wars in other countries where there's a really high risk of being killed. Obviously, in certain places at certain times, there has been a high risk of being killed. And as you say, at the moment, the threat is focused on police officers. I mean, there have been security assessments of the number of people in the new IRA. This is the group that claimed the attack on the police officer, how many people are actually involved in it, and they say about 500 supporters. This is a fairly recent, within the last few years, assessment of them, and about 100 people who are able to actually carry out attacks. Now that's tiny compared to the provisional IRA during the Troubles. But I was speaking before I came on here because I wanted to, phone round various security sources and so on. I was speaking to a senior former policeman who was very well rehearsed in combating the old IRA, the provisional IRA, and he said that to have two gunmen, he was very struck and alarmed by the fact that there were two gunmen involved in the shooting, and that suggested that there's very few people, he was pointing out, actually even during the Troubles, got involved in the shooting. So it's not anything like the Troubles, but there are people who know a lot about these things who are troubled, who are concerned.
Yeah, look, indeed. Look, thank you very, very much for that and for coming on at short notice and bringing us such wonderful insight, really, into it. So, Ben, cheers. Ben Lowry there, who is the editor of the newsletter, which is based in Belfast, and that is in relation to the fact that the terror threat in Northern Ireland has now been raised to severe. So, there you go. That's the latest. Now, we're heading back to the High Court, where Prince Harry has appeared for the second day of his privacy case against the Daily Mail. I'll bring you up to date on that and what other celebs wandered in. Also, of course, there's the Gwyneth Paltrow trial, which, as and when she emerges, I imagine we might give you some pictures and footage of that. That is just an absolute Hollywood catastrophe of a court case, let me tell you. I'm Patrick Christys, and this is GB News.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like
Absolutely.
on Jubes & Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We've got a brand new lineup every Saturday night on GB News.
From 6 p.m, I'll give you my unique take on the world today.
Then at 7, it's me, Calvin Robinson, with my Common Sense Crusade.
New to GB News is the Saturday 5.
5 times the opinion.
Join us every Saturday from 8 p.m. as we debate the week's stories.
With us 4, plus a special guest.
And at 9, of course, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Brand new Saturday nights on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Prince Harry is at the Royal High Court for day 2 of the court case into alleged phone tapping by the publisher of the Daily Mail. Yesterday, the Duke of Sussex made a surprise appearance at the court alongside Sir Elton John, who's also bringing legal action against associated newspapers. And it's believed to be the first time that the Duke has been in the UK since the funeral of the late Queen last September. With me now is GB News' national reporter, Ellie Costello, who has been all over this case for us. So, yes, look, Ellie, what's going on?
Well, good afternoon to you, Patrick. And yes, again, Prince Harry brought the star quality on day 2 of this preliminary hearing in the privacy case against Associated Newspapers. He made his way in the side entrance this time, which was probably wise advice from his security, bearing in mind that he did bump into a photographer when he made his way through the front door on Monday. But he was waving and smiling at the press as he made his way into court today. He does want to be seen by the media, to be taking a public stand against press intrusion. And Patrick, we have just got a bit more of an insight into that personal crusade against press intrusion into Prince Harry's life, because I've been given, as have many other members of the press, written witness statements for the claimants in this case. And I just had a look through Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, and he has said in his written statement that the royal family withheld information from him about phone hacking when he was a working royal. He says that they didn't want him to bring a claim as it would open a can of worms. This was submitted, this written statement, before this civil claim against Associated Newspapers was brought. The Duke of Sussex went on to say that he was conditioned to accept that his family's rule was never complain and never explain when dealing with the press. And he went on to speak about another hacking claim against News Group newspapers. They published the Sun newspaper, and Prince Harry writes that he became aware then that there was a claim that he could bring. This was in 2018. He said that the institution was without a doubt withholding information from me for a long time about phone hacking that has only become clear in recent years as I pursued my own claim with different legal advice and representation. So there you go. That's just some of the insight that we got in that written statement that has been submitted ahead of this civil claim that we're seeing in the High Court at the moment. But that makes sense, bearing in mind the behaviour that we've seen from Prince Harry in the past couple of days. He has sat listening very intently to barristers on both sides of the courtroom. He is making notes on his notepad and also having very regular conversations with his legal team. He wants to be across these legal arguments. That is very, very clear to see. So it will be very interesting, Patrick, to see if he makes his way into the High Court again for day 3 of this preliminary hearing. It's expected to last until Thursday, when a judge will decide then if this case is thrown out, as Associated Newspapers would like it to be so, or whether it does proceed to a full trial.
Indeed. Look, Ellie, thank you very, very much. Ellie will be keeping us updated as when we get any more info on this case that will no doubt be gripping the press for a rather long period of time. Ellie Costello there, our national reporter, GBNews' national reporter. Now, I just want to delve into my inbox because this relates to a debate that we're about to have when I come back, which is about the... what would you say, eviction is probably a bit stronger word, but the moving out, the moving on of Afghan asylum seekers, around 8,000 of them, at a variety of different asylum seeker hotels across the country. They're being told that they're going to have to accept whatever accommodation they're given or render themselves homeless. And I was asking you, what do you make of all of this, OK? Because there is a distinction here. There is an important distinction between the people who are in the Afghan asylum seeker hotels, so specifically for those hotels, and let's be honest, quite a lot of the other hotels. These are people who genuinely fled in the immediate aftermath of the Taliban retaking over Afghanistan. And a lot of these people supposedly helped us during the war effort, etc., over there. So we do, I think it's fair to say, owe them at least a relatively substantial debt of gratitude for that. But I think Marcus has made a good point here, which is that he says that these people will have come over, will have given them safety. He says that we'll have given them a place to stay in a hotel for around 20 months, and if they are offered a house, they should take it, no matter what that is. Otherwise, it's their choice to make themselves homeless, and if they decide to do it, then so be it. And Rob has got in touch to say, it's all very well turfing out Afghanistan migrants from hotels, but where are they going to go? And are they going to compromise our ailing social housing availability still further? And, Rob, this is a vital point, because this is really a massive point of contention. Well, these people are already here. and they're staying, so they have to be put somewhere. That's that, OK? So the question is, well, where do they go? And they're going to be offered a variety of different housing. That's going to be either newly built social housing, so that's a point of contention already for a lot of people, isn't it? Building new houses. I mean, how many planning developments in your local area are cancelled because of NIMBYs and stuff, but now we can build stuff for people who've maybe just arrived in the country? That will be what a lot of people are saying. There's that. Or they will occupy the lower end of the private rental sector. So already people who are maybe struggling to afford to get on the... We're not even talking the housing allowed to buy houses here. The lower end of the private rental sector, they will be maybe outbid by essentially the Home Office. And I think, Rob, you make an interesting point as well, which is not just about the housing availability, but also about public services in those areas, so schools, the GP appointments, etc., etc., etc. So gbviews@gbnews.uk, that's the inbox. When I come back, we will be having a debate on that very topic, which is it fair and just to be moving people out of the asylum seeker hotels and putting them into the community and told if they don't accept that housing, then they will be made homeless? What do you make of that? gbviews@gbnews.uk. I am also going to bring you some incredibly dramatic, devastating footage, it must be said, coming from Nashville on that tragic shooting. It was a school shooting. 6 people were killed. At least 3 of them were 9-year-old children. The perpetrator was a former pupil at that school, was born a girl and had transitioned into manhood. We have got some dramatic new footage there of body cam footage from the police, who incredibly bravely stormed the building there and did see to the threat. But first, it's time for your latest headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and hello to you. Our top stories this hour. MI5 has increased its terrorism threat level in Northern Ireland from substantial to severe, meaning an attack is highly likely. And that comes roughly a year after Britain lowered the threat level for Northern Ireland for the first time in more than a decade. Deputy Chief Constable Mark Hamilton said in the last hour the Police Service of Northern Ireland are working hard to make the community safer.
I want to pay tribute to the community today for their fortitude in having to deal with this threat level, and also to my colleagues and friends in the police service and other services who will work against this threat. We're not going to be deterred from providing our visible, accessible, responsive policing to the community. We're determined not to go backwards. Northern Ireland has made great progress over the last number of years, as has policing. The threat level was severe for a number of years. Unfortunately, we are somewhat used to it, but it doesn't mean we accept it. It means we have to work even harder to get it to a level that is far more acceptable.
Well, in other news, the Education Secretary is urging teaching unions to accept the latest pay offer and to end their threat of industrial action. The government's offering a £1,000 one-off payment and a 4.5% pay rise for next year. But the National Education Union has recommended its members reject the deal and instead go on strike on April the 27th and May the 2nd.
Do you think the NEC's decision's undemocratic, Mr Corbyn? Are you going to stand as an independent candidate?
Journalist questions to the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn just then, who's been banned from running as a Labour MP at the next general election. Labour's National Executive Committee has approved Sir Keir Starmer's motion to stop Mr Corbyn standing as a candidate. Mr Corbyn was suspended from the Parliamentary Party in 2020 over his reaction to a damning report into anti-Semitism, which found Labour had broken equalities law. He could, though, still run as an independent. Those are your latest news headlines. I'm back at 6 with more. See you then.
OK, now new footage has just been released from a body cam of one of the police officers who went into the school after the shooting in Nashville. This is the school shooting where 6 people were killed, several children, several just 9 years old as well. Now, the police officers went to try to detain the shooter. Our television viewers will be able to see this footage now. It is of police officers, body cam footage, initially coming in, going up the stairs, guns drawn. And they can hear the sirens going off in that school, and they're basically trying to go through the school to try to find where this shooter is. And it is just absolutely devastating to see this. The police first entered the building through the front door, and they just went through and continued to walk through the corridors. Unfortunately, and thankfully, all of this, of course, is pixelated, but unfortunately, the police officers had to step over what appeared to be the bodies of children in order to get closer to where they believed the gunman to be. That gunman is a former pupil of the school which caters for 3 to 11-year-olds. It's a Christian school in Nashville in Tennessee, and was born a girl, transitioned into manhood, as it were, and then went back into the school. And we're coming up now for our television viewers towards the moment where they find the individual in question who was still firing. The actual moment of the shootout between the gunman and the police, we will not show to you for obvious reasons. It is, of course, incredibly distressing to see. But this is the body cam footage of those police officers, and I think it's worthwhile as well just taking a moment to commend the bravery of these officers involved. They will have had very little to no idea at all about what they were walking into. Quite probably would not have known whether or not it was multiple gunmen, what on earth the situation was, and we're going to leave it there because this is about to be the moment of the actual shootout. So look, with me now is Ernest Coverson of Amnesty International USA's Director of Gun Violence Prevention. Thank you very much, and it's great to have you on the show. Joe Biden has now come out and called, I believe, for a ban on a variety of different automatic assault rifle weapons. Is that correct? Just first, though, before we talk about that, you're going to have to educate me a bit on gun law, I'm afraid. I don't know. I don't really know that much about it. But your emotions when it comes to yet another school shooting.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's another school shooting, right? We're 44 days from the Michigan State University shooting that took place in Lansing, Michigan, or East Lansing, Michigan. And that was at a university. Here we are again, like I stated, 44 days later. We're seeing the same thing now at an elementary school with 9-year-olds that were murdered as they went to school. The school happened to be at a church. And so you have two dynamics there. Not only a school, but also a church. And so it is, again, heartbreaking as the work that I do on a day-to-day basis to consistently see and witness these shootings that are taking place on a constant basis here in the country.
No, indeed. And mystery surrounds the exact motive at the moment. Is that right? Apart from the fact that this individual was a former pupil there. It's a Christian school, and they were initially there attending as a girl who then transitioned into being a man. And it's Audrey Hale, who's now 28 years old. Our TV viewers will be able to see images of the moment that Audrey Hale entered that school. They had previously just shot through the windows to walk through the corridor there. But is there any more information coming out about that?
As the last reports that I've seen, no. I do understand from the police chief there was a manifesto that was created that they found on yesterday as they started investigating this person. There was also a map that I understand the police chief stated that they found as well. And so I believe all of those pieces of motive is still being developed and trying to figure out why. But it does seem to be a planned attack and not just something of happenstance.
Ernest, can I ask you a bit about how easy it is for an individual to get hold of a heavy-duty weapon? Do we know anything about the kind of weapon that this individual used in this shooting? How easy it is to get hold of, and what Joe Biden now, and quite possibly yourself, I would imagine, want done about things like this?
Yeah. So these weapons many times are what we call assault weapons. They're fully automatic, typically used are AR-15s weapons, and they are legally able to be purchased here in the country. According to the state, you can be as young as 18 and purchase one of these automatic weapons that are typically made for military use. And so it's easily obtained. Anyone can purchase it right now. Joe Biden, along with Amnesty International and other organizations, are calling for an assault weapons ban. There is legislation currently within the Congress that would ban these weapons, and individuals that would not be able to obtain, these weapons, and only usage would be for what they was made for, which is the military. And so we're looking to hopefully get that passed currently in the legislature.
And it's going to be a tough battle, of course it is. And I mean, I regularly report here on things like, you know, the knife crime epidemic that we have in this country or general violence. I thank God on a daily basis that we do not have anything like the same relationship with guns that you guys have over there, because it is a completely different level. Can I just ask you, Ernest, as well, for a little word about those brave police officers who have stormed into this school, will have presumably got the calls over their radio to say there is a gunman on the loose in the school. One would imagine very little additional detail on top of that, and they just go straight in there, not knowing what to expect, guns drawn, and deal with a threat. I mean, those people are just amongst the bravest people in the world.
Yeah, it's an applaud and a thanks for their service and for what they've done. You know, luckily they were able to get in and quickly. I believe it was a matter of minutes from when the initial call happened to the time they actually breached the building. And so we are thankful for these officers for doing their job and doing it as quickly, because they probably saved many lives that happened, you know, within that school on yesterday. And so we most definitely thank them for the work that they have done on that. But we most definitely need the banning of these assault weapons here in the U.S. And that most definitely would not only keep individuals and kids safe, but those police officers as well.
Indeed. Look, Ernest, thank you very, very much for joining us. And it's much appreciated to get you over there from stateside, as it were. Ernest Curverson there is Amnesty International's USA Director of Gun Violence Prevention. And, yeah, just whizzing you through, as you can see there, that breaking on the US school shooting. 3 pupils were killed, all aged 9 years old, at this Christian school, which caters for pupils aged 3 to 11. There were 3 adult victims as well, all in their 60s, actually, who were at that school. And the perpetrator is a former pupil, attended that school as a girl, born a girl, transitioning into manhood, as it were, 28-year-old Audrey Hale, and they, of course, were killed as well during this particular incident. Right, OK, well, we'll move on from that now, and the government is going to crack down on rowdy tenants. That's right, so new laws could give landlords the power to evict unruly tenants within 2 weeks. I suspect this is good news for a few people watching now who might not get on with your neighbours because they keep having big raucous parties, or maybe they're Airbnb-ing their flat or their house as well. What do you make of this? Is it right? I'm Patrick Christys and this is GB News.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back, everybody. Now, landlords across England and Wales will be given additional powers in order to evict troublesome tenants under government proposals to address antisocial behaviour. The measures would cover tenants who play loud music, use drugs, cause damage to their property or fall behind on their rent. And all new private tenancy agreements will have to include clauses that specifically ban antisocial behaviour, with homeowners who rent out their properties on the Airbnb website having to register on a new database that will make it easier for local councils to deal with complaints about problematic guests. As you can tell, there's quite a lot for us to get stuck into here, and with me to do it is landlord and property expert, it's Richard Blanco. Richard, thank you very much. Right, OK, so is this a good thing for landlords who currently have someone, frankly, kicking their house to smithereens and they can't get them out?
It is a good thing. You know, at the moment, landlords tend to use no-fault eviction, which means we give tenants 2 months' notice if we need them to leave because of antisocial behaviour. That is going to be abolished this year through the Renters Reform Bill. The legislation will go through this year, and that's why we're looking to government to bring in new provisions. So what they're saying is that they're going to speed up the courts, they're going to prioritise antisocial behaviour cases, they're also going to set out principles by which judges must decide cases and reduce the notice you have to give from 4 weeks to 2 weeks.
OK.
So that should improve things, but we're really worried about whether the courts are going to be able to cope.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, there is that, isn't there? Can you just give our viewers and our listeners a little bit of an insight into some of the issues, the horror stories, really, that landlords have to face?
Yeah, I mean, things like noisy parties, cannabis factories, brothels, that sort of...
Gosh!
all the kind of... unsalubrious kind of stuff.
I can confirm that my landlord has never had to deal with any of this, by the way, just before they get in touch. But yeah, go on.
But it can be a nightmare because, you know, where you live, you're sort of stuck there and you can't really get away from it, and you've got to get up for work in the morning and so on. Also, if you're living in a shared house where you're renting a room in a house and, you know, one of your housemates is a nightmare and causing antisocial behaviour, that can be really, really difficult for you as well. The concern is that it takes a good 6 months at the moment to evict somebody, and most cases are at the discretion of the judge, and often judges are reluctant to evict people, so that's why we need some tougher legislation on this.
What's the situation with Airbnbs? Because I understand that a lot of people who maybe have lived in a sleepy village for years decide that they're going to Airbnb their house, and a lot of the neighbours can be quite annoyed because before you know it, there's a pool party taking place. They've got a hot tub in the back garden. So is this as much for neighbours as well as landlords?
Well, it is for neighbours too. I mean, obviously, antisocial behaviour has a really big impact on neighbours. With Airbnb, the idea is to introduce a register for short-term lets. Airbnb do say that they have banned parties, so you're not allowed to have parties in Airbnb premises. Yeah. And also there's a hotline for neighbours to call Airbnb, yes, if you are concerned. And they also have various kind of algorithms, I think, in their system that works out whether you might
You're a party animal.
You might be trying to have a party. Not quite sure how the algorithm does that, but somehow it works it out.
And just very quickly, very finally, tenants are going to be all right. They're not going to... To good, ordinary, law-abiding tenants like me, I'm not going to end up getting served a notice. You're out on your backside in 2 weeks' time.
Absolutely no. These provisions are pretty fail-safe, really. If you're a good tenant paying your rent, not causing problems to anyone, then you're safe.
Lovely. Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. Great to have you in the studio. Richard Blanco there on the latest of the landlord's reforms, I suppose. Right, OK, finally now, thousands of Afghan refugees, we've been building up to this for a while, are to be given a minimum of 3 months' notice to move out of hotels and into alternative accommodation. This is under plans detailed by the Veterans Minister. Johnny Mercer made the announcement in the House of Commons earlier this afternoon, claiming it's unacceptable and unsustainable for thousands to be living in hotels. But if these people refuse to accept or fail to accept their offer, they will be left to find alternative housing independently, raising concerns that they might be made homeless. So, to discuss this further, I am now joined by the Director of the Centre of Migration and Economic Prosperity, is Stephen Wolfe, and refugee rights campaigner and the first British Afghan Conservative candidate in the UK is Darius Nassimi. Thank you very much, Darius. I'll start with you. Is it fair that these Afghan refugees are going to be told to just accept whatever accommodation they're given, do you think?
I think we need to move away from relying too much on hotels. Not everyone will be able to stay in London. And I think that we need to come up with a new solution. However, I don't think it's fair that we should be giving our refugees from Afghanistan the option of either accepting a home that the government will offer them or that they're going to have to find alternative accommodation. I mean, essentially, we're forcing them to accept the offer or to face homelessness. And let's not forget that these are people who are already traumatised. They've already been displaced by war and conflict. We promised them a warm welcome, and they shouldn't be treated like this. This is going to add to their mental health issues, this is going to add to anxiety, and this is going to create further uncertainty for these refugees. OK, Stephen, I'll let you come back to that. Stephen Wolfe, your views?
Well, look, there is obviously a concern about people whenever they're moved from hotels, but the reality is, when you look at the data that's been published by the government in their Home Office figures, it's called ASY 0D2, you will see that during the course of the year, 8,600 Afghans were offered accommodation in approximately 34 councils across the country, and only 254 refused to go to that accommodation. So out of the remaining 8,000, the idea that we're going to see thousands of people on the streets is really quite laughable if you look at the statistics that have already gone through. In addition, you would actually see that the government has decided, one, to offer the councils an extra £250 million, £35 million for new funding for councils. And we also saw 20 new four-bedroom houses built by Barratt Homes last year at a cost of £5 million. So last year, the government spent £655 million. That's an average, Patrick, of £100,000 for each Afghan that we brought over.
Now, I want to get one more in from both of you, so I'm going to ask you to be quick, Darius, if that's all right. What would you say to people who say, look, if these people are really genuinely fleeing war, they should be happy with whatever we offer them?
What I would say to that is, in relation to housing in particular, I think people should have more freedom of choice. I don't think it's fair to say, accept this option or you're going to have to find accommodation by yourself. And let's not forget that these people have now adapted to their local communities. The children go to schools in the local area. Some of them have found a job in that particular location. So I think, and then, you know, we're receiving queries from the community saying that ACAA is now like our family. What are we going to do if we move hundreds of miles away from this area? OK, now, thank you for that. Now, very, very quickly, Stephen, do you have sympathy for people who think that this accommodation might be naff and they don't want to take it or not?
I think it's probably not going to be naff. I think it's really more about the location of where the people are going, and that will be the difficulty for them. But unfortunately, the government cannot afford to buy the houses in the areas, particularly London, where most of these are. It's just not sustainable. So a give-and-take approach has to be done.
Both of you, thank you very much. Stephen Wolfe, and, of course, as well, we had Darius Nassimi there for both sides of that particular debate. Right, well, Michelle Dewberry is somewhere in this studio at the moment with Jubes & Co. coming your way very, very shortly. Michelle, are you all right?
I'm all right.
I
asked to be as far away from you as possible today. And they let me. Normally, I've got to sit next to you.
You do, yes. But I've started wearing deodorant to work now, so that's all OK.
I lost my sense of smell. I'm one of those long COVID victims. I wouldn't be able to smell you anyway.
Oh, well, it's all right. Well, it looks like the Labour Party just got rid of Long Corbyn, actually, but there we go. Anyway, right, what have you got coming up?
Indeed. Right, I want to talk about assisted dying. You had a first evidence session today. Is it time to legalise it or not? I want to talk about the lunatics at West Yorkshire Police who described a crime where a woman has committed all kind of awful situations. It's not a woman I want to know, do facts not matter when it comes to the eyes of the law anymore? How worried should we be about that at all? Or is it me that's losing the plot and actually everyone can be whatever they want and I just need to get over it, shut up and move on? I'll also perhaps touch on Corbyn a little bit and lots more too, but if you want to know the rest, you've got to tune in.
We'll have to tune in. Thank you very much, everyone. I've been Patrick Christys. I'll see you tomorrow at 3.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office. It's a grey and damp day out there for many of us. Brighter skies are starting to turn up in some places, most specifically Northern Ireland, and it'll be warm where that happens. But otherwise, it's relatively chilly because we've seen a cold start to the day and then these weather fronts move in. They're bringing a lot of cloud cover, outbreaks of rain, and the rain will continue on and off through the rest of the day, increasingly becoming confined to Scotland and Northern England, whilst southern parts of the UK keep a lot of the cloud, keep some drizzle for a time. A few showers for Northern Ireland, but they'll die away overnight. And then by the early hours, well, it's drips and drabs of rain in the west, drier towards the east, a lot of cloud for all of us, and as a result, a frost-free night, temperatures at around 6 to 10 Celsius by and large. A bit chillier in the far north of Scotland. It's here where we'll see some rain arrive for Orkney and Shetland into Wednesday morning. Also some outbreaks of rain for the north and west of Scotland into Northern Ireland at times. The rain, though, across England and Wales, more showery for a time during the day before some wetter weather arrives into Wales and the southwest later. In between the cloud, the rain, the showers, temperatures reaching 16, perhaps even 17 Celsius. The warm spot likely to be North Wales. But heavier and more persistent rain turns up by the evening, developing widely across England and Wales into southern and western Scotland, Northern Ireland as well. So it's a wet end to the day on Wednesday. The rain does fizzle away once again into the start of Thursday, but we've got this mild airflow still, and so it is a relatively mild start to the day on Thursday with 10s and 11s fairly widely. Some sunshine to be had first thing through the Midlands, East Anglia, North East Scotland. Wet and windy, meanwhile, for Shetland. And across the rest of the UK, quite quickly, showers get going. These will be lively with hail and thunder, and they'll align into bands in places to give some longer spells of rain. Friday brings further wet and windy weather.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9,